Looking, takes off running, Carson Beck with his legs, puts Miami on top. What a drive.
Great drive called by Chris Fowler in Kirk Herbstreit last night. Great game. Sometimes I find myself rooting for certain players, and I was really rooting for Carson Beck last night to play well. I've been rooting for him all season long. If you paid attention, I really liked Miami early in the season. Stanford Steve kind of talked me into it. Denton talked me into it a little bit. Denton did not like Carson Beck, and I thought he was going to be right, but that's why you have to wait until the end of a season. He's been a very interesting, for those who haven't followed it, very interesting college football story for the last year. And last night, the story added by far and away its most dramatic chapter. Good morning, everybody. Just over a year ago, Carson Beck tore up his elbow in the SEC championship game, quarterbacking Georgia against Texas. It was his UCL, the ulnar collateral ligament. Nobody knew if he'd ever be able to throw the football the same way again, because he was at Georgia, as he is now, different for today's game, especially in college. He is a true pocket passer primarily, not necessarily a guy that's going to rip teams up with dual threat ability. He's 6'4", he's statuesque at times, in the pocket always. The one thing he could do at Georgia, and there was no mistaking it ever, and even at Miami this year, once he started to throw the football and he got that strength back into his arm, he could always spin it. It's the one thing he could do. He could really spin it. Sometimes he spun it in the wrong direction, like to the other team, like he did against Louisville this year when Miami was undefeated and ranked number 2 in the country. And they went down, they played Louisville at home on a Friday night. And he threw 4 of the ugliest interceptions you'll ever see. I mean, a couple of them right at the line of scrimmage, right to a defensive lineman or a linebacker. Hideous interceptions. They played SMU in a game that was really the game in the moment in early November that they had to get to stay in the chase for the ACC championship game and an ACC championship and an automatic bid into the playoff. And he had a very good game until the end in overtime when he threw an absolute horrific interception, costing them the game. He was paid $4.5 million to come to Miami, in part because they needed a quarterback, but also in part because Georgia didn't want to have him back. They didn't want to have anything to do with him. There were all sorts of questions about character and intangibles and a lot of different things. But if you watched him at Georgia, you knew sometimes he really looked the part. And then other times he really didn't. He's on the older side. He's 23. He's been in college football forever. And this Miami thing, which if you're a sports fan, a football fan in particular, you know how tight-knit the Miami fan base, the Miami alums, football players in particular, from any era, how tight they are, how much this means to them. You know, we've gotten a sense of it in this market with guys like Santana and Clinton Portis, and of course when Sean was alive, how big of a deal Miami football is to those that played there and those that went to school there and those that grew up rooting for the Canes. And they haven't been relevant for 2 decades for the most part. And they weren't necessarily a given on the Sunday morning when the field was unveiled that they'd even be in the field. It was a debate between Notre Dame and Miami. But in that season opening game against Notre Dame, Carson Beck drove Miami down the field in the fourth quarter in clutch moments on 2 different drives, including the game winner that came with about a minute to go on a field goal to give them the lead. He was outstanding in that opener. It was 20 of 30 for over 200 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. And that was the difference. They beat Notre Dame Labor Day weekend. And that's why they got the bid as the 10 seed, and Notre Dame was left at home. Now, part of that was also because of the way the ACC handled their tiebreaker, but that's another story altogether. I was really rooting for not only Carson Beck, but all of the Miami fans. I know that they can be and have been at times a bit over the top, a bit delusional about what they've been, certainly for 2 decades. But man, when it means that much to so many people from afar, I'd love to have that with my football program. I've never had that with football. Always had it with basketball at Maryland. Never had it with football. And you could tell, at Texas A&M, and then in the quarterfinal against Ohio State, and then last night in a classic against Ole Miss, how important it is to those people. Ray Lewis out there before the game, Edgerrin James, those were the 2 elected, veteran team captains for the coin flip. I mean, one U-star after another on the sideline, but the guy that was required to make all of that right for so many people, so many generations of this cultish fan base, was Carson Beck. And I am telling you, for college football fans, and if you're not one, nobody thought he was going to do it last night. If you've been watching him, you thought he's going to end up throwing a back-breaking pick to seal this game and send Ole Miss to the final. And Ole Miss was a great story in its own right with Lane Kiffin and all the coaches, those that could coach, those that had to go to LSU. Trinidad Chambliss has really come on. Man, I didn't see it early in the year, I'll tell you that right now. But that looks like an NFL quarterback to me if he were just a little bit taller. He's like 6 feet, barely. But what a playmaker. What a run last week against Georgia, last night against Miami. But it came down to one final drive, 3 minutes to go, down 27-24. And this run that Miami's having was on the verge of ending. And let me just tell you, if you watch this game, for 3 quarters, Miami was the dominant team, just not reflected on the scoreboard. It was one of those weird games in which one team was clearly the better team for 3 quarters, dominated the line of scrimmage, the trenches. At one point, they had run 40 plays to Ole Miss's 8. For the game, Miami ran 88 plays in the game to Ole Miss's, where's that number? I had it here earlier. To Ole Miss's 59. It was a game-dominated time of possession. Miami 41 minutes, 22 seconds to Ole Miss's 18 minutes, 38 seconds. That's a real difference. Miami dominated for 3 quarters. The offensive coordinator, Shannon Dawson, gets a little bit too bored, I think, at times, and dials up these trick plays at the worst possible time. He did it against Texas A&M, and it cost him. Not the game. Last night, Wildcat, when they're running it right down the field, and then they go to a flea flicker after a Fletcher 19-yard run where he carried half of Ole Miss's defense on his back. And then he goes flea flicker, and it's a devastating 12-yard loss. And that costs some points. They still don't run the ball enough when you consider how effectively they run the football. This was a game in which Miami dropped. No exaggeration here. They were flat-out drops of not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 interceptions right in their hands. Couple of them deflections, a couple of them really bad reads by Trinidad Chambliss. They couldn't catch any of the interceptions that were thrown to them. And then on the offensive side, Carson Beck had 4 balls dropped, flat out dropped by his receivers. Miami should have been up based on the way the game was dominated at the line of scrimmage. They should have been up by 17 at the end of 3 quarters. But they weren't. They were up by 1 going into the 4th quarter, and then started a 4th quarter similar to the Ole Miss-Georgia game last week in the Sugar Bowl. It was a back and forth 4 lead change fourth quarter that ended with Chambliss's Hail Mary, if you want to call it that, and a very, I think, deserved conversation about whether or not that was defensive pass interference on the final play of regulation. But Beck's drive, the third downs he overcame, he did the same thing against Ohio State. It wasn't a statistical masterpiece against Ohio State, but they were 7 of 14 on third down, and they needed all 7 of those, and he delivered on 6 of those 7. Last night, third down was the clutch down. And on third down, Miami was 11 of 19. Why? Mostly Carson Beck. That last drive, 3 third down conversions, one by penalty. It was a good back shoulder throw, though, on the face mask. And then the 3rd and 10 throw was big time. And then his scramble on 2nd and goal to win it, or to give them the lead, was great. The end of the game. Hail Marys are not from the 35-yard line typically. Let me start with that. For you out there that believe that that was, a Hail Mary throw. A Hail Mary you typically see in the end zone, it's, a jump ball. You're throwing the ball straight up into the air from the 50-yard line or even in your own territory or maybe at the other team's 45. You got 3 or 4 receivers, you got 4 or 5 defenders, and it's a jump ball. That's not what that last play was. That last play started at the 35-yard line. And that ball was on a rope. It wasn't thrown straight up into the air, and it wasn't thrown into a jump ball circle. There were 2 receivers in the area, okay? So there was an element of, I'm going to put it down there with 2 receivers and 2 defenders, but the defender clearly committed defensive pass interference, grabbing the receiver for the whole ride into the end zone, tugging, and really restricting the receiver's ability to catch the football. Now, just for those that don't know that aren't college football fans, pass interference is not a spot foul in college football. It's a 15-yard penalty. So they would have gone from the 35 to the 20 and would have had one more snap in the game. And even from the 20 at that point, it's still, maybe a 1-in-5 shot, 1-in-6 shot, something like that from the 20-yard line, one play, the way you can defend one play and stack everybody at the goal line or however Miami would choose to play it. From the 35-yard line, it would not have been 1st and goal at the 1 had they called the DPI in the end zone. It would have been 1st and 10, but one play, no time left, untimed down at the 20. Now, here's the other part of that argument, is that on a last play of the game, typically you just don't get that call, especially from distance. Inside the red zone, maybe. But the perception of that play is Hail Mary. And by nature, almost by definition, the fact that it's the final play, you're praying that you get some sort of big-time play that's going to have to turn out to be a little bit lucky, whether it's a great catch or whether it's poorly defended or whether it's a deflection or whatever it is. But that was definitely 9 times out of 10, 8 times out of 10 during the normal course of the game. That is defensive pass interference. And the fact that it typically does not get called on a Hail Mary, I understand that. I think the referee on the call last night called it and described it as mutual combat. Mutual combat on a Hail Mary play. The only problem I have with that is it wasn't your traditional Hail Mary throw. It was on a rope to a certain degree because they weren't at the 50-yard line. They were at Miami's 35-yard line. So it was almost like a normal shot to the end zone. Hell of a football game, though. What a great football game and what a great ending for Carson Beck. And it's not over. They're going to play the national championship game, and they're going to play it at Hard Rock Stadium in South Florida, their home stadium. First time in the playoff that a team will be playing in their home stadium. And of course, that's true because Miami hasn't been much, and the stadiums in which they play aren't college stadiums, with the exception of in Miami. New Orleans isn't anybody's college stadium. I guess, well, Tulane doesn't even play their games there. Arizona And Scottsdale's not anybody's stadium. SoFi's not anybody's stadium. Dallas isn't anybody's stadium. Those are the venues, right, Max? Miami, Dallas, New Orleans, LA, Scottsdale. Has the national championship been played anywhere else other than those locales?
I want to say Atlanta.
Oh, that's true. Atlanta, but not a college football home stadium.
Yeah.
Yes. Good call. Yes. Atlanta, I think it's been played there. So, yeah, Miami's going to get to play in their home stadium. Now, that's not how the tickets will be divvied up. It's not like their season ticket holders are going to be able to walk in and go straight to their seats. This is the national championship game. Loved that game last night. Was frustrated watching it because I really wanted Miami to win the game. And I felt like if they lose the game, the lesser of the two teams won. Ole Miss is not as good as Miami. It's a great story, and they were incredibly resilient. Pete Golding, man, that dude, I mean, the pulse rate, I don't think ever budges above 60. It doesn't matter what the situation is. He did a hell of a job in relief of Lane Kiffin, and what an absolute cluster you-know-what the sport has been. They've got to change the calendar. You cannot have a coach and a staff coach a team to its greatest season and then leave before its greatest and most important games. All the while, the transfer portal is opening up. The product is still what happens on the field, what happens on Saturdays, what happens over December and into January. That's your consumer-facing product, not the portal, not coaching changes. It's all part of it. But what draws eyeballs are games on Saturdays. You got to have the regular coaching staff. You can't have players and coaches leaving before the biggest games of the year. That seems pretty common sense. You know, this is an era in college sports with NIL and transfer portal. Think about where we are right now in this sport. Carson Beck got $4.5 million to go to Miami because Georgia didn't want him. I mean, 15 years ago, hell, 10 years ago, schools would have been put on probation for giving a kid a ride to class and buying him a hat. That's what happened at Maryland with Bob Wade back in 1989, 88. Although, really, the reason the Terps got borderline death penalty for literally a ride to class, Rudy Archer, and a hat from Bob Wade, the coach. It wasn't really that put him on probation. It was that he lied about it to the NCAA. But can you imagine? I mean, 10 years ago, you buy a kid lunch and you're on probation, you lose scholarships. And now, not only do you pay your starting quarterback $4.5 to $5 million, but as was the case in Washington the last couple of days, the University of Washington, DeMond Williams, accepted a $4 million one-year deal and then decided to back out of it. Now he's back because the lawyers got involved. Not only do you get to sign and play for $4 million, $5 million, put a Lamborghini in the parking lot at the practice facility, but you get to basically sell your services twice a year through a portal if you don't like your playing time or you don't like your coach. The sport has changed. But what hasn't changed, if you just tune in for the games, are the games. And last night was a classic for sure. 31-27, Miami off to the national championship game. They will play the winner of tonight's Oregon-Indiana game at the Peach Bowl in Atlanta. I do have not only NFL smell test picks for the show today, I have two picks on tonight's game, Oregon and Indiana. Let me just tell you, I'm going to be rooting for Oregon based on the way I will wager on the game. But I kind of would like to see Indiana win by less than 3 because I think Indiana-Miami would actually be the best matchups for the national title game. You're talking about two grown-up big boy teams. especially, in the trenches. God, is Miami big and good on their offensive line. There were I saw some of the conversation and I stayed up and I watched Scott. Scott had Cristobal on. He's different, that Cristobal, Mario Cristobal. But there was some talk about how Ruben Bain, Miami's, almost lock first round top 10 kind of a pick, a guy that, we're going to take a long look at when we get into heavy draft talk, how he was ineffective in the game. And Mesidor, their other, terrific edge, was kind of ineffective in the game. Cristobal did say that the flu was going around, and they lost some key players down the stretch, man, in their secondary. But one of the reasons that Miami's defensive players weren't putting up big stats on the night is that they weren't on the field. They were barely on the field in the game because the time of possession, I already told you, and the play count overall, Miami 88 plays. Ole Miss 58 plays. Big difference. And in the first half, I mean, there was some talk at halftime. Ruben Bain's got to show up. Mesidor's got to show up. Really? For them to show up, they have to be on the field. Their offense is on the field the entire half. Great football game, man. God, I love this. And I love watching this and talking about this a lot more than after a 5-12 season, talking about offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator hires. Should be a good one tonight. This is right now the beginning. Last night was the beginning of this extended, long, great football weekend. One of the best sports weekends of the year. Semifinal game number 1 last night, semifinal game number 2 tonight. Then you get 2 wild card games Saturday, 3 on Sunday, and then 1 on Monday night. That's not a bad 5-day long weekend of football. I like Thanksgiving week and Thanksgiving weekend because it's rivalry weekend in college football. Plus you get, the NFL on Thursday, Friday, Sunday night, Monday night. I love that weekend. I love the NCAA tournament first and second round in March, the Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, which is now moved back to Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday with the first 4. But this is a really good sports weekend. Can't wait for tonight. All right, we've got 5 wild card games coming up. Yesterday on the show, Max and I ranked the NFC playoff teams, power ranking style, 1 through 7. We're going to do the same thing with the AFC next. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. It's 1 through 7 because it's playoff time. Yesterday, we did our NFC playoff power rankings. Today, we're going to do our AFC power rankings. I'll run through my NFC just in case you missed it without the conversation to go with it. I had the Rams 1, Seattle 2, Philly 3, Green Bay 4, San Francisco 5, Chicago 6, and Carolina 7. Max, your NFC 1 through 7?
My 1 through 7 was Rams 1, Seahawks 2, Packers 3, 49ers 4, Bears 5, Eagles 6, Panthers 7.
Yeah. So now let's do the AFC. And I'm going to tell you right now, and when you go through this exercise, the only conclusion that you can come to is that the AFC playoffs are even more wide open than the NFC playoffs. It's really hard to come up with a 1 through 7 that everybody would agree on. I don't even think we'd agree. I think there'd be 4 or 5 teams that 3 or 4 that people might put at number 1.
Yeah.
You know, we had Ross Tucker on the show yesterday. He said that, yes, it's the most wide open postseason he can ever remember. But he also said that he thinks the winner of the Buffalo-Jacksonville game on Sunday, that's the early game Sunday, is going to the Super Bowl. I thought that was interesting. But that's not a crazy take. I don't think there are any crazy takes with the AFC. So I'll go first. This is the team that, going back to late October, early November, I have pegged as a team that was capable of winning the Super Bowl and certainly going to the Super Bowl. And I'm going to tell you that I don't know that I feel as strongly today as I did even 2 weeks ago. But the Houston Texans are my number 1 AFC team. They are the best defensive team in the league right now. Seattle's a close second, maybe Philadelphia, right there with Seattle. They have the 2 best, combo pass rushers in the league in Will Anderson Jr., who I think is the second best defensive player in the league behind Myles Garrett, and then Danielle Hunter on the other side. Their secondary is solid. They're well coached defensively. D'Amico Ryans has done a really good job at Houston. He really has. They have won, the Texans have, 9 games in a row. I put my wager, which I've talked about before, at 30-1 to win the AFC Championship. I put that wager in the morning after they beat Buffalo on Thursday Night Football. That was November 21st. Okay, that was a little bit later in the season than I thought it was. I know that we had been sort of eyeballing Houston before that. Remember, they opened up the season losing 3 winnable games. They were 0-3. They lost on the last play of the game to Tampa, late in the game to the Rams, late in the game to the Jags to open up the season 0-3. They were without their quarterback, C.J. Stroud, for a stretch in the middle of the season. Davis Mills was in at quarterback, which is why they barely beat the Titans in a game. But their defense that night against Josh Allen and Buffalo was so overwhelmingly suffocating. I was like, if you can do that to Buffalo, you can do that to almost anybody. So now, why do I feel less strongly about it right now than I did earlier? They've actually given up some yards and points, like to the Raiders a few weeks ago, to the Chargers, and to the Colts in the season finale. And I know it was not, the Colts with Riley Leonard put up 30 points against Houston. The Raiders put up 21 against Houston's defense. Geno Smith had a really good game. Ashton Genty rushed for over 100 yards. It was the best game of the year for Ashton Genty against Houston's defense. So I've seen a little bit of a letdown here. And the other thing is, I do like C.J. Stroud. I think he's a bit underrated, but he will make a boneheaded throw or two, and that could cost him even on Monday night against Pittsburgh, who's been a pretty good team at turning teams over. But I've got Houston at number 1 in the AFC. They're the 5 seed in the playoffs. I know the schedule they played. I know they beat 1 team in 17 games. New England has 1 win over a team that finished with a winning record. That's it. Buffalo, earlier in the season. But I've watched them enough. I think they're the real deal. I think they're incredibly well coached. I think the offensive play calling and scheme with Josh McDaniel, no one can ever question him as an OC, as a quarterback guy. And Drake May looks 100% like the real deal. And they've got explosiveness all around him, and Travion Henderson and Stephon Diggs, and even a guy like Hunter Henry, talk about sort of resurrecting his career. 7 touchdown catches for Hunter Henry this year. That's got to be close to the most ever for him, right?
I think so.
He had 9 in 2021. Was that a Mac Jones team? 2021?
Yeah, it was Mac Jones' year. Love Hunter Henry.
So I got New England too. It's not going to shock me if New England ends up in the Super Bowl. Number 3, I'm going to go with Buffalo only because I can't put them much further down when they've got the best quarterback in the AFC playoffs. And I do believe that. I think most people would say Josh Allen's the best quarterback. There are some good quarterbacks in the AFC playoffs. I just mentioned one of them, Drake May, playing at a high level. I think C.J. Stroud sometimes is a bit underrated. Justin Herbert, Trevor Lawrence, Aaron Rodgers playing at a high level. I mean, Bo Nix right now is probably the worst starting quarterback in the AFC playoffs, right? Easily. And they're the 1 seed.
Yeah.
So I've got Buffalo at 3 because of Allen, but man, defensively, they're just not that good. I'll tell you what they're going to have to do, and we'll get to our preview of the 5 wildcard games. Max will lead us through that process sometime next hour. But, I think about the Buffalo, protection of its defense. It starts with James Cook, and they can do it that way. They can absolutely possess the ball and run the football with James Cook. And by the way, with Josh Allen, it's not just Josh Allen's a part of that running game. For those of you who think that the quarterback shouldn't be involved in the running game, Josh Allen finished as their second leading rusher, rushed for nearly 600 yards this year. But James Cook rushed for 1,600 plus. And then you've got Ty Johnson, who is, how many years now since he finished at Maryland? Is this year 7 or 8 at this point?
It feels like forever. I feel like I've been watching him for centuries.
Ty Johnson was explosive as a Terp. He's been explosive as a role player with the Bills. That's the way they do it against Jacksonville. It's got to be James Cook. It's got to be the running game. They've got to they got to keep Trevor Lawrence off the field. I've got Buffalo at 3. I've got Jacksonville at 4. I mean, I don't know how you put Jacksonville any lower than that. They've won 8 straight games to finish up the season. Yeah, not necessarily the most impressive slate of teams. The Cardinals, the Titans, the injured Colts, the Jets, the Colts again, the Titans are all part of that. But they did go to Denver and house the Broncos. That was impressive. Trevor Lawrence playing at a high level. They're well coached offensively. There's no doubt about that. ETN, this is a good football team. I've got them at 4. And, when Ross Tucker said that yesterday to me, Max, to us, when he said the winner of that game is going to the Super Bowl out of the AFC, you can certainly make a case for either one of those 2 teams right now as the best team in the AFC.
You really can.
I think you can make a better case for Jacksonville, even though I've got Buffalo ahead of them, because I just would take Josh Allen as, there's a 2X on Josh Allen in the evaluation of the team. He's just that good. Number 5, I've got the Chargers at 5.
Ooh.
I haven't even named the 1 seed with the bye yet.
Yeah.
Denver. I love the Chargers defensively. Jesse Minter's done a hell of a job. They're very good on defense. This league has a lot of great defensive teams. We've talked about it. Seattle, Philly, the Rams, Houston, the Chargers, Denver. I think the Chargers are good enough defensively to make a bit of a run, and then they've got a quarterback too. The problem with the Chargers is they've got the worst offensive line, and it's not even close in the entire playoffs. Can you win with the worst offensive line? Probably not the whole thing, but can you give New England trouble on Sunday night on the road in Foxborough, cold, with that defense schemed up well? Maybe. I think it'll be the best defensive team that New England's faced all year. Has to be, right? Like I'm looking through their schedule. They played, they played the Bucks, and I thought the Bucks would give them a good test, and New England passed that test. But I mean, look at their last, Jets, Bengals, Giants. They lost to the Bills. And the Bills are not very good defensively. The Ravens aren't good defensively. The Jets and the Dolphins. What they face Sunday night, they haven't faced this year.
Yeah, like the Browns defense is pretty good, but again, it's the Browns. Yeah. They've got the Falcons who had
But do you remember that game? Weren't they losing that game at halftime?
Pulling it up right now. No, they were up 9. They were up 9-7.
9-7 at what, halftime?
Yeah, at halftime, and then they scored 21 in the third.
Yeah, I mean Cleveland literally couldn't do anything offensively.
Yeah, no,
nothing.
They were bad.
Who was the quarterback that day? Was it Gabriel or?
I believe that was a Dylan Gabriel game.
Yeah. I've got the Chargers at 5. I've got Denver at 6. I mean,
man,
a 1 seed I've got as the 6th best team in the AFC power ranking wise.
It's one of the best offensive lines and defenses in football you got down there at 6.
I know I do. I don't think I look at the, when in doubt, quarterback, stupid.
Oh, yeah.
And Nix is the worst starting quarterback in the AFC playoffs.
Very much. Very much so.
That's another thing we could do. Just rank the quarterbacks because there are some good ones left.
I think it's going to look.
And then I've got Pittsburgh 7, but I'm going to tell you right now, I'm probably going to have Pittsburgh in the smell test for Monday night. They look like the right side, and that's against my number. I got my number 1 against number 7, and I'm telling you that I think number 7 has a chance to win that game. That tells you how close and how hard power ranking the AFC playoff teams are. I'm very curious to hear yours. Let's do it on the other side of the break.
Sounds good.
When I say yours, I'm talking about Max's because we were kind of similar in the NFC, but I think it can go almost.
No, it's going to look a little
bit
different here.
We'll do that next.
Sorry. All right, happy Friday, everybody. We kick things off with a college football classic that took place last night. Miami and Ole Miss locked in a dogfight, a back-and-forth game with 7 lead changes. Ended up on the back of Miami quarterback Carson Beck as he walked in untouched into the end zone with seconds remaining. Miami, they pull off the win 31-27. More college football news as Damon Williams is back in Washington after he previously announced his intention to return or to enter the transfer portal despite signing a contract to return to Washington next year. Now the Huskies have locked up their quarterback for the 2026 season. Some NFL hiring news. The Dolphins have hired Packers Vice President of Player Personnel John Eric Sullivan as their new GM. Sullivan's been with the Packers since he was hired as an intern in 2003 and worked his way all the way up to VP of Player Personnel in 2022. The Commanders, they have interviewed Cowboys tight end coach Londo Wells for their vacant offensive coordinator position on the defensive side. They have requested an interview with Raiders DC Patrick Graham. Meanwhile, the Nats, they were able to avoid arbitration with 4 of 5 eligible players. Among the signings are CJ Abrams, Luis Garcia, Jake Irvin, and Mackenzie Gore. The lone exception, Kate Cavalli, who filed for $75,000 more than the Nats. He filed $900,000. Nats filed at $825,000, by far the smallest arbitration gap among eligible players this season. However, there is still hope that both sides can come to an agreement before the hearing in the coming weeks. Tonight, we got the Caps in action against the Chicago Blackhawks. You can catch that this evening over on 106.7 The Fan at 7:45 for an 8 p.m. puck drop. Meanwhile, right here on the Team 980, we got the Wizards taking on Derek Queen and the Pelicans. That'll be, again, right here on the Team 980 at 6:45. Tip-off set for 7 p.m. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live every day from 10 to 1. You can catch programs like Take Command throughout all of this offseason. Don't forget to hit the like button whenever you do decide to join us and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that is what's trending.
We'll get to Max's top 7 AFC playoff power rankings. I was just fooling around with the quarterback conversation that we had, like trying to rank the quarterbacks in the playoffs. I mean, Stafford and Allen are the top 2.
Easy.
That's easy. After that, it gets really, really difficult because you can't. It's not about next year or the year after. It's about right now.
Yeah. How much
Who would you want right now?
How much do you like Brock Purdy and Sam Darnold, buddy?
Yeah, I mean, Herbert, Rodgers,
Love.
Drake May.
Caleb.
You've got Trevor Lawrence. You've got Stroud. You've got Hurts.
A lot of good quarterbacks.
The problem with Seattle, I just don't. At the end of the day, I feel like Sam Darnold will do something that will cost them.
It's the Mario Cristobal thing. You're just waiting for the shoe to drop.
Well, I think people were waiting for the shoe to drop on Carson Beck last night. That's why I was so happy he came through.
Yeah, I was waiting for it.
Give me your top 7 AFC power ranking playoff teams.
Do it. All right, number 1, I've got the New England Patriots. They just feel like the most complete and the best coached team right now. I feel like Josh McDaniels, he can scheme them up. He can scheme up any defense. Just like the Texans and the Broncos and the Chargers have all been really, really good, but Josh McDaniels just time and again finds a way to do it. So I don't want to pick against them throughout these playoffs. I think they've got a really good shot if Drake May continues to play the way that he's been playing this season. So for that, Patriots, number 1. Number 2, the Houston Texans. That defense, for everything I said, unbelievable. And everything you said, Daniil Hunter, just all of it. The concerns are the offensive line and, like you said, CJ Stroud's tendency to make a boneheaded throw or turn the ball over late in the game every now and again. But at the same time, if you look at the rest of the quarterbacks on this list, they do much of the same. So number 3 is going to be the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Real quickly, you get Jacksonville 3.
Yeah.
If Houston had the Mixon of last year,
I'd feel a lot better about it.
I mean, it would be hard not to.
Yeah.
I mean, wasn't Mixon really good in their playoff win over the Chargers? I want to go back and look at that. I think he really was in that game and was really good against the Chiefs, too. Remember, they were in that game at Arrowhead. Joe Mixon.
Yeah, I'm pulling up.
Oh, yeah.
106, 25 carries and a touch.
106 yards against the Chargers and 88 yards. He had 194 yards rushing in 2 games, 4.5 yards per carry, 2 touchdowns.
25 carries against the Chargers. Good Lord. They're going to be Houston's going to have to run the ball this weekend. I think they beat the Steelers. I do think the Steelers might cover with just all the data that's coming in. But again, we'll get to that when we preview it on Monday.
3.
Yes, Jacksonville 3. They're a very complete team right now, and they're playing their best football. And that's really what it comes down to, man. In the playoffs, if you're playing your best football, you got a shot. And the Jags, they've been able to turn the ball over. I think they have the second most turnovers in the NFL behind the Chicago Bears. But I feel like the Jags have come at a more ethical manner. But yeah, for all that, they're number 3. Number 4 is the Buffalo Bills. The Bills are great. Josh Allen, really good. A lot of question marks at the receiving position for me. And their rush defense is, I think, 31st in the NFL. I don't think a team with the 31st best rush defense in the NFL is going to be able to make it to a Super Bowl. So I really, really like the Jags this weekend. But again, we will see. That's why we play the game. Number 5, the Denver Broncos. The Broncos defense, incredible. Best offensive line in football, as I've said time and again. But Bo Nix, I can't trust him any further than he can accurately throw a football. So, but at the same time, Sean Payton's a really good coach. Really, I feel like any of these teams that I'm listing off, like all top 5, can make the Super Bowl. And I honestly think number 6 can too, which is the Chargers. They're coming in at 6. That defense, Jesse Minter, has had them flying around the field all season.
If the Chargers were opening at Denver, let's just say New England had been the 1 seed and Denver had been the 2 seed, I think I would have picked the Chargers.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
So why do you have the Chargers below Denver?
The offensive line injuries are really hard to overcome.
Head to head.
They're really hard to overcome, but I do trust Justin Herbert more than I trust Bo Nix.
Me too. And by the way, he's been a badass this year, basically playing with a broken hand.
Yeah.
Offhand.
It's just the Chargers, just too many injuries to overcome. It's been a rough year for them. They've lost a lot of guys like Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater, just two big holes to overcome. And then Najee Harris at the same time. It's all going to come down to kind of how their receivers play. If Ladd McConkey and QJ can get active and get going, I do think that they're going to stand a really good chance against New England and really could get it going. But that Patriots secondary, Christian Gonzalez, I'm really high on how he's been playing. So it's going to be Sunday night's going to be one to watch. I'm really looking forward to it. Number 7, the Steelers. Aaron Rodgers is playing well. We're going to see how he plays against this Texans defense on Monday night, but I don't see with how this squeaking into the playoffs, just fighting tooth and nail. They've been playing playoff football for like a month and a half already, and that is gruesome. It really takes a toll on you, especially as a player, on your body. I can't see the Steelers making another. I can't see them stringing 4 wins together, is what I'll say. But yeah. That's my 7.
Yeah, I think Pittsburgh's the obvious 7 team.
Yeah, much like Carolina.
I certainly can't see them winning 3. I can see them winning Monday night against my number 1 team. I think that game's going to be a hard-fought game. It's going to come down to, to me, mistakes. The team that makes the, extra mistake is going to lose that game. It could easily be a 20-17 type of game. I think the Chargers are interesting to me. Like, that Sunday night game is going to be, that's a real test for the Patriots. And if they pass that one, and they look good, their offense isn't slowed down at all by the Charger defense, man, because they would get then the following week Jacksonville, if Jacksonville wins, right? And if Jacksonville doesn't win, they would get the winner of the Pittsburgh-Houston game. It's possible they're going to face the Chargers and Houston back-to-back. And I say that because I do think there's a chance Buffalo beats Jacksonville. And if Buffalo beats Jacksonville, they're the 6, they would go to Denver as the lower seeded team. This isn't a formal bracket. It gets reseeded, after each round. So Buffalo would go to Denver, and then the winner of the Pittsburgh-Houston game would go to New England. And so the Patriots can really prove themselves in facing potentially back-to-back the Chargers and the Texans defense. But they're at home. I think you've got them as your number 1 team. I can't find problem with that. They're just so well coached. They're so good. May's so good. The receivers are excellent. The scheme is great. They're buttoned up. I've said this about New England all season long, that yes, you can pick apart the schedule. And there's no doubt that the 14-3 is partially a reflection of the schedule.
Very much.
But if they had played a tough schedule, I still think this team would have been a 10 or an 11 win team, and would have been here in the playoffs. And I say that because they didn't falter once. The NFL is designed for the best teams in the league. We see it week in and week out. Double-digit favorites losing outright. That never happened, and they pummeled people. The Dolphins, the Jets, the Giants, going back to, earlier in the season when they crushed the Panthers. I think they crushed the Panthers the week after the Panthers shut out the Falcons 30-0. They lost 3 games this year. The Raiders week 1 at home, nothing says week 1 is more fraudulent and more fake than the Raiders beating the Patriots in Foxborough week 1. Just remember that year in and year out. Week 1, major head fake every year. They lost to the Steelers at home in week 3. Before we knew they were good, they were turning the ball over. Drake May had, I think, a pick in the end zone and a couple of fumbles in the game, and Pittsburgh won that game. And then they lost that game in which they led Buffalo 21-0 and then lost 35-31. Patriots are either going to prove a lot of people right with they didn't play anybody by losing early, or they're going to prove a lot of people wrong because They legitimately were pummeling the bad teams. It's not like they let down against even one bad team that they faced. And it happens every year. I mean, let's just look at the other best records. Denver lost to the Jags at home. Well, that's not a bad loss. Where's Seattle? None of these teams lost very much. Yes, Seattle hasn't lost since losing to the Rams. But you get my point. Double-digit favorites lose all the time. Hell, the Rams lost to the Panthers not that long ago. The Rams lost to the Falcons on Monday night 2 weeks ago, week and a half ago. It happens, and it didn't happen to New England once this year. All right, there was news. Washington did actually interview somebody for the OC position. We will talk Skins next. Washington requested permission to speak with and then did interview Lindo Wells, who is the tight ends coach in Dallas. He's been a big part of game planning the last 5 or so years. He was on the staff with Dan Quinn for 3 years. That's not the name that I think is at the top of the list for most of you. Let's find out who is at the top of the list for John Keim. John Keim jumps on with us right now on short notice. You're the best. At John_Keim on X, on Twitter. So, John, who's the offensive coordinator going to be?
Oh, who's it going to be? Or I thought you were who's at the top of the list for me. I think, Kevin, it will be either McDaniel or David Blau.
Yeah.
Like that's what I would say. That's where I would say right now. Now, if something else happens, I don't know. But that's, I think the fact that Blau is getting looked at by Detroit I don't think they want to lose him.
Yeah.
And if you don't feel like you can get McDaniel, because here's the problem. Like, let's say Blau is in Detroit interviewing and they offer him the job, and now you have to make a decision. Do you wait for McDaniel, who might get a head coaching job, or do you just hire Blau? That'll be the thing. I think that could be what it comes down to, but we'll see.
So that's an interesting thing that you just said, because I remember when they went through the head coaching search, they were impressed with a lot of people. You and I both know They were impressed with Dan Quinn right from the beginning. But Raheem Morris kind of gave them an ultimatum and said, I need to know today, essentially, or tomorrow. If not, I'm going to take the Atlanta job. And they said, we're going to go through our process. So this time, the process might have to slow again to get Mike McDaniel, but then you risk losing Blau. So, I agree with you, by the way. I think those are the two co-favorites, and for me, it would be McDaniel one I'd want in terms of desire.
Yeah.
And then I'd be fine with Blau based on everything I've heard. Of course, he's never been a coordinator before, but
McDaniel's next level. And if it's a choice between the two, well, yeah, I think the one, and I talked about this on the podcast, but the one danger with Mike is it's probably a short-term thing. It could be a year and one and done. It could be probably max 2. But if it's a max 2 and he's gone, it means it went really well here. If it's a one and done, it went really well here. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'll take that issue. That's a good problem.
Yeah, listen, it's I think it'd be fantastic for Jaden. And it'd be if Dan Quinn, because a big part of the stuff with Kingsbury was about the run game direction. Mike McDaniel's fantastic with that stuff. So it would be, that would be a grand slam, even if it's for 1 or 2 years. Now, I would say this about Blau. If they have a lot of success after a couple of years, he's probably gone too.
Yeah, look, Cliff could have gone to New Orleans last year if he had really wanted it and wasn't getting paid a head coaching salary. He may have been gone after 1 year. So that always is the case when you obviously have a defensive head coach and an offensive coordinator of an elite level quarterback. But give me the process. Give everybody the process in which the team would land Mike McDaniel. Give me a projected timeline. He's got to go through head coaching interviews. He's got to go through. How would the whole thing play out and land on Mike McDaniel?
Oh, I don't know if I can give you a detailed description of that.
But is it weeks or is it days?
Oh, no. I see what you're saying. Okay. I think it'd be more. I don't think it'd be weeks. I think if you're, because if you're waiting that, I don't think you're going to wait that long for it, because you might be left, with what? If they know, he's probably not going to get a job, they're just doing this. And then he's like, I'm going to go through this process and I'm going to be here for you, right? Not anticipating getting a job. And if that's the case, then yeah, you can wait. I don't know that I see that. So, I don't think it would be weeks, Kevin. I think it'd be more days to week would be my sense, because I don't know how many teams are going to interview Mike. But, I think I know a few teams will. So
let's just assume for a moment and play the hypothetical. He does not get a head coaching job, and therefore Mike McDaniel's going to be an offensive coordinator next year. And to me, you can add somebody to the mix here, but to me, it's Baltimore and Washington as the best opportunities for an offensive coordinator in this market to either, coordinate Lamar Jackson or to coordinate Jaden Daniels. I don't know who the head coach in Baltimore will be. Let's just say it's Jesse Minter. All right. Just throwing somebody out there. Which of the two jobs is more attractive for a Mike McDaniel?
Well, I think it'd be here, but I say that because of the relationship he has with Dan Quinn. Now, they're actually, you know what? I'm going to say that with some caveats, but I do think that I know he's a huge fan of Jaden Daniels, and I wrote a story from the spring talking to him at the owners' meetings, among others, and he talked about how he had talked to Kyle Shanahan about some freshmen he saw at Arizona State years ago.
You're talking about McDaniel now?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry. So you talked to Mike McDaniel, and he's a fan of Jaden Daniels. All right, continue. He talked to Kyle Shanahan about Jaden?
Correct. About Jaden after he said, he goes, I watched this freshman at Arizona State, and just started talking about it. It was Jaden. And so he paid attention to him throughout. And he's like, he even said in the story, he said, Washington fans, you guys can breathe a big sigh of relief because of him. So like that, so he has a deep affection for Daniels as a player. Then he has a tight bond with Dan Quinn, who of course helped him to get with his sobriety, right? And he coached with him in Atlanta for a couple of years. So I think because of that familiarity, and then that I could see him wanting to come here. And if you're Mike, some people might worry about okay, what kind of job security does Dan Quinn have if you're doing this? But if I'm Mike, I'm like, listen, if I'm coming here with this offense, I'm not worried about his security because it's going to be better, right? And that would be the thought process. I mean, any coach is going to think they can help with that situation. But if you and also he may not be here long anyways. So how much would that matter? I don't know. But I do, Baltimore would be attractive because it's a new coach. So you're going to have that security. You do have a lot of talent on that offense. You do have a run game with Derrick Henry and obviously Lamar. So you can do some things, but I think just if you're looking at from a familiarity standpoint, that would be it. And it also, like I said, I think for Mike, I think Detroit, let's say Blau is in Detroit, then that's out. If Blau isn't there, then I think Detroit's in play as well.
Right. Yes.
For sure.
With Jared Goff. All right. Let's talk about David Blau for a moment. I've talked about him here the last couple of days. David Blau, most of you know, has been on the staff since the new staff came in. Was on that staff and elevated to quarterbacks coach when Tavita Pritchard left to become the head coach at Stanford. I think a lot of us in the media and you guys as fans have probably heard since the moment they hired him, he's the next big thing. He's smart, the whole thing, but he's never coached before. So I'm curious as to what you think David Blau would be as an offensive coordinator. Would it be more Cliff Kingsbury? That's not what Quinn wants, apparently. Would it be Ben Johnson? Maybe it is. Is it a combination of both? What does Blau look like? This is a real projection, of course, but what do you think he looks like as an offensive coordinator system-wise, philosophically?
I'd say maybe a combo of it, but, he was with Ben Johnson. He was with Kevin O'Connell. He's been with Kingsbury. So there, he has a wide range of systems to draw upon. But I think the whole thing, even with Kingsbury, I don't know if it was the system as much as it was the emphasis within that system. And what do you want to emphasize? What do you want to be? I think that was a bigger issue than it was just, I don't like his system. I don't like Cliff. I don't like system. I think it was just more again, which direction do you want to take the offense? So could he have taken it within that system? Yeah, he could have. I think I could see being a combo, but I think I'm going to guess, and this is a guess, that the Ben Johnson influence would be pretty high because he obviously, you were talking, I'm going to say that he's a terrific offensive coordinator. Well, so is Kevin O'Connell, and so, but I think you can take things from both of them that match up. So I could see that being a little bit more the emphasis, but yet also being able to incorporate the quarterback's legs here, which was what Cliff liked to do. So, but yeah, I think, if this is a guess, because nobody really, it's funny because someone else over there was part of the appeal early on next year would be that nobody knows. Nobody would know what to expect. And so I, just like anybody else, you're guessing like, okay, take elements here and here and here, and what makes sense for this offense? You know, like, do you have the talent? You need a system, but you need the talent to play within that system, because it's not always okay, just change systems and you can do this, because you have, you know, it's not always that as simple as that. So you kind of look at like, what is the talent they have? What makes sense for the talent they have, you know? And I think you look there, but I would think, you know, that Ben Johnson and O'Connell would have a heavy influence.
You know, before McDaniel became available yesterday, you know, I was talking about how if it turned out to be David Blau, it'd be an easy pitch. We couldn't let him leave the building. You know, that would resonate with our fan base. Yeah.
Yep.
Listen, and that would resonate because of all the people that were here and left and went on. We know the story. Not that they should care about that, but I thought that would make sense. But now, if Mike McDaniel didn't get a head coaching job and ended up as an OC in Baltimore or Detroit, it'd be a big letdown to this fan base. Don't you think?
Yeah, I definitely think that. And that's not even anything against Blau, because maybe he will be very good. It's just that we know how good Mike is. And, you know, he is a next level. Like, one of the things when Kyle was here, when Sean was here, and what you'd hear from the players at that time was these guys always knew the answer to why. Like, why are we doing this? And they'd have an answer. Why, you know, if this happens, then expect this, and they'd have the answer, right? Like, providing those answers gave guys a lot of confidence when they stepped on the field. I think Mike is like that as well. And they also felt like those guys, I think it was like Niles Paul would call them like, you know, evil geniuses, you know, with what they would come up with. And so I think Mike would be in that as well. And like, there was a clip I was watching on YouTube yesterday where he's talking about like, we're always evolving in the offense. So he's like, his thing was, I don't care what the defense are doing, because we're always evolving, trying to stay a step ahead. And like, that's hard. So when you see that, like, well, yeah, of course that's the guy you want, you know, versus someone you don't know. But yeah, you're right. With Blau, it would go back to, you know, people upset when Sean McVay left. You know, why didn't you keep him in the building? Well, here's your chance to do that. Now, is he Sean McVay? I mean, I was around Sean. I don't know. Like, Sean to me is one of one, with how young, with what he did and how at the age. But that's part of it. And I think for Quinn in Atlanta, when he had to change staffs, like Kyle left, he let like McDaniel, Matt LaFleur, those guys go. And so I think for him, like some of these moves that he's made this week goes back to, what did you learn in Atlanta? And I think a lot of it was, you take care of take care of a situation before it becomes a bigger problem, right? And then even if it's just a difference in philosophy, like that can fester and down the road could become something more. And so you change that, because like, if this is just not working for Cliff or for me, right? So move on. And then it's also like, who did you let leave the building that time? Well, there were a handful of really good coaches that you could have kept to maybe elevate to a higher role and stayed here, but he let them all go. And so I'm guessing the memory of that is also partly why, like, we've got a guy in the building, do what you can to keep him, right? So, you know, it doesn't mean he's going to be great. We don't know. We have no idea. I do know all of that, and I do know that, you know, that coaches, a lot of people, and Cliff, I think when they brought him here and they talked about him, it's like he's like one of the smartest players he's been around.
Right.
So, so there's all of that. What it means for him as an OC, you've got to go through it. Like even Sean, when he was an OC, and I remember
he struggled early on.
I have the receipts from on social media from people here, like
I know,
people were upset, and so it took a while. And even he said it took him a while, like how you have to learn the sequencing of play calling and when to call things and when to be aggressive, etc. It takes a minute.
Yeah, I got the receipts on Kyle because everybody wanted Kyle run out of town because the only reason he was a coach was his father was the head coach. That was the best of all time.
All he did was hire his buddies.
Yeah, all he did was hire his buddies. You know, you said something. You said something that just reminded me of something, because Mike Shanahan told me, and it was with Cooley one day, and he said Chris was the first player that they had where they would where you said that they always did a great job of explaining the why. You know, and Cooley always said that. But Mike said the first player that demanded that we explain why was Cooley. And he said to me, I'll never forget, he said, there was an era in which you never had to explain why. Then you decided to explain why. But then you were, you know, in the latest generation, last 10 years or so, you were required with players of today to explain why. And that's sort of the evolution of that.
Not every coach can do that. And I'm talking like, okay, if you're going to do this on the field, like, what is the reason? So why am I doing this?
Yeah.
And not every coach can answer.
But there was a day in which you just did whatever your coach said.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Listen, that's all you did, right? But you're right. Like, I remember Chris has some fun stories about that time, about how he would needle some of the coaches and all that.
Oh, yeah.
But also, like, he was hard on them to, you know, partly, it's funny because with Chris, like, he was so smart. I think some things came easy to him as far as understanding all the X's and O's and all the movements on the field. And I think it's like, then it's like, for him, it was like, all right, I'm going to just really quiz these guys too. You know him. And, it's like, it makes you, I think it makes him better. And because it's what kept him engaged, but it makes them better because you have to provide the answers. And I think any coach, if you're not challenged by that, and you can't do that, and there have been a number of coaches here who couldn't, then it's going to be tough.
I mean, I've told a lot of the, you know, Cooley and Shanahan staff, you know, stories over the years, but Sean told me the story of how, you know, in meetings, tight end meetings, when he was the tight ends coach, that literally Cooley would just be sitting there drawing pictures, which is what Chris would do when he was doing a radio show with me. Yeah. You'd look over and he's an artist. He was a true artist and he's drawing pictures and you think he's not paying attention. And I remember Sean saying, but he was the one that could repeat the entire install once the meeting was over. And by the way, Chris famously on the show that he and I were doing together said Sean McVay should be the head coach, Jay Gruden shouldn't. And the first interview that Sean goes on, even if it's for an OC position, they'll scratch that and they'll hire him as a head coach. Yeah, and this is when nobody knew who he was.
Right. And I'll tell you what, like he told me that as well. And it's funny because he was also the first one that said Kirk Cousins should be the quarterback. And that was after, like, I think it was after I brought my son to the radio station one day and we're sitting there talking with him. This is when the radio station was inside the building.
Yeah, we had our studio there. Yeah.
Chris said something to the effect of, like, should trade Robert and just go with Kirk. And my son still, this is like, 12 years ago, still talks about that. I mean, it was just because, like, how, you know, he certainly knew.
Well, I mean, anyway, Chris was among the people we first started to hear all of the horror stories of behind the scenes. All right, I want to go back to Blau for a second.
Yes.
What makes him so interesting to everybody, specifically? Are we just taking everybody's word that he's a genius? Like, I'm curious if you know the reasons why.
I just, all you hear is just how smart he is, right? And I think, like, it goes back to that. I also, you know, I know in talking like Jaden, how much, like, he likes him a lot. I think there's a good, not that this is like the important thing here. Like, he and Jaden have a good rapport, and they're very competitive. It's almost like a big brother, little brother thing at times. With how they are, but I think there's a relatability to him as well. I think being in a bunch of different systems and understanding them, I think, is also a big key. So I think that's a big part of that as well. So, but as far as, like, you know, the funny thing is, I mean, he was but he was an assistant quarterbacks coach 2 months ago.
Right.
I mean, and now we're talking about this. I also think when Quinn came here, that, again, like, when I wrote about this last year, like, he had, okay, if X happens here, I've got the succession plan in place. And that hasn't transpired this way. It's not transpiring the way you thought it might. And I say that because, like, okay, well, if you're looking outside, you know, why, you know, if you have the succession plan, you go here. But I do think Tavita was a big part of that succession plan. And then he, of course, left to go become a coach at Stanford. Then it's like, now where are you going to go? So, anyways, but I know with Blau, it's a lot of, you know, just very smart and a number of systems and understands them and can communicate that.
We're talking, of course, to John Keim. All right, let's just go backwards a bit because I haven't talked to you even off the air for the last week or so. What happened? Why is Cliff gone? I mean, you've alluded to it. I think we all have to a certain degree, system, philosophy, whatever. But what specifically happened, and then who made the call, actually?
Dan Quinn made the call. Dan Quinn made the call. A lot of it is just so down the stretch, they became more of a run team, right? The feeling was, and even Cliff said it, like that was unique to me, and it's what they had to do. But that was more of what they want to be here. And the feeling was that, okay, if that's the case, can you be that way if it's not out of necessity? And I don't think that was the case. And I think that was at the heart of it. And I think they want to have, I would just say, a staff of like an aligned vision of what you want to be. And could that have been, I don't know that when, like, 'cause my thing has always been, Kevin, like, okay, if that's the case now, why hire him in the first place, knowing this is what he is? But maybe you get him here thinking you're going to have maybe an evolution of this as well, right? And last year, there was so much success that it covered up. If there were any potential issues about direction, it was covered up because you had so much success. And I'm not saying covered up in terms of like, oh, they're back there sparring. I'm just saying like any potential thoughts of anything like this isn't working for me for the future, like as you evolve this offense. So I think that was, that certainly happened. But I do think it was like, as you move there, like I kept hearing from a lot of people, like Dan wants to run the ball, and he would tell them that a lot. And then other people would bring up like run pass balance, the ratio, right? It doesn't mean that it's 50-50, that it's like it could change on the game depending on how the game is unfolding. Like some games, passing is going to be more required. You never go into games.
Yeah, especially when you're down 2 scores before the game starts.
Right. Yeah, you can't. Exactly. And so I think there was that feeling as well. So yeah, I think that was a big deal.
Yeah,
that to me was at the heart of it. But yeah,
was there a moment, John, that you think it became real in Dan's mind that he might be moving on from Cliff?
I don't know. I think it'd be easy to go back to the Minnesota game and wonder about that sequence there. I don't like. I talked to someone over there about that, and they're like, I said, was this what you heard about Dan? Or just, he goes, no, it was more their thoughts more than it was Dan's. But I think it'd be something anybody would look at. And the funny thing is, even in that sequence at the goal line, you had 2 plays that should have worked. But on the first one, you had a tackle slipping out too soon on that play,
and then you had
Debo dropping the ball.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is, like, that game could have been a lot different had you scored there. And then there was another sequence where I think after it's 14-0, there was, I think, 3 passes in a row, something like that. And then, and so you're just not helping yourself. But I don't know if it was like, all right, I'm done with this. But I do think it was an accumulation over time of just a difference in philosophy and how you want it to look and how you want to go. And if it's a struggle to get someone else there, and a staff with an aligned vision, I think would be, also another way to put it. So yeah, I haven't heard that there was one direct time. And then, I know, like, obviously, and Dan said this at one point, he and Adam had been having discussions for weeks once they knew, like, that, all right, season's over, right? You're done for, as far as like playoff possibilities or whatever. Like, so now you're starting to, like, what needs to change, et cetera. But like I said, I still would say this was Dan's call.
Cliff reportedly is going to interview for both the Baltimore and the Tennessee head coaching openings. Where do you think Cliff lands, and as what?
I mean, I could see him getting one of these head coaching jobs. I don't know about Baltimore. Tennessee would be interesting because you have a young quarterback there. And I think then it always depends on the level of how much he likes him. my problem there with the ownership hasn't exactly been great.
Right.
As opposed to Baltimore, which is extremely stable, and you have another quarterback who could play, who could, fit in what you do, and you have Derrick Henry, you have some talent there. I don't know that it would be. I don't know if Baltimore would want him as their first choice. I don't know that. But could you, if he doesn't get a job, then it would make sense. Like, say Jesse Minter gets that job, then would he hire Cliff?
Yeah, as the OC.
I could see that too. But I think I know he wanted to explore possibilities. I think part of that was that that's why it was a mutual parting. Like, listen, I'm going to try and find another job anyways for a head coach. I'll just go do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Do you think Marcus Mariota will end up going with him if it makes sense? Like there's, an obvious, clearly, like if he ended up as Cleveland's head coach, Mariota would make a lot of sense. With that defense, you put in, a low-end NFL starter, top-end backup, they'd be probably much better than they've been. But
probably, but I don't know. I don't know if that was, I don't know. And, I'm a native Clevelander, like, I don't know if I'd want to go there. And
well, I'm just saying that
room, like the circus that's there.
Yeah,
but yes, but
he's actually the betting favorite to be the head coach in Cleveland for whatever it's worth. But but back to the core question: Mariota, will he follow Cliff?
Possibly. I think it depends where he goes.
Yeah,
and then I think I know Mariota really has liked it here. I don't think it's just because of Cliff. I think there's a lot of reasons that guys like it here. And again, like I always tell people, locker room this year, Kevin, was as good as it's ever been for a team that was bad.
Right.
What that means, I don't know. I know, and I always.
You've got a lot of experience with locker rooms on teams that are horrible. You're losing locker rooms better than anybody.
It has been brutal. And this was not that at all. Now, you're not hanging banners for good locker room, right? Like you hang banners for titles. But that does matter to players who want to be here. So when you're asking about a guy who wants to be here in the past, if this is 2023, he's out. Like, why would you stay here? Now, I think it gives him a chance. And I think it's like, well, who is coming here as the OC? Because if it's McDaniel, if it's Blau, like, that could keep him here as well. I know he likes being with Jaden, but he has talked a lot about that. And so, you're comfortable here? Would that make a difference? And I know he likes Cliff's offense. It was also the first time he played in that offense. So it's not like he's been following him around for years and years, but he does feel like the offense fits him.
Yeah.
So
it did.
Part of it. Then it's like, it did. And then it's like, okay, because the other key part even for last year for Mariota, the key question for him was, is there somewhere I can go where I have a chance to start? And if there is, then you're going to take that. So if that means Cliff, if Cliff got the Cleveland job and he said, like, you have a chance, you'll start here because because if he does, then I think that, or at least have a chance to start there, then I think he would. I think the hard part would be like, that's quite a circus in that quarterback room, or whether it's in the quarterback room, but with the noise outside of there surrounding that quarterback room. That's a better way to put it, because I don't know what, guys like Shador and all those guys are like in there, but we know the noise outside there. And so is that something you want to jump into? I don't know.
All right.
But it would give him a chance. If he has a chance to start, I think that would be key as well. But I do know he likes it here a lot.
All right, I got 2 minutes, and I want to hit 3 things real quickly. First of all, Lendo Wells, the interview for OC, the tight ends coach in Dallas. Just real quickly, what's that about?
First of all, I think sometimes with these things too, it could also be looking at, like, they need an offensive line coach as well. Now, he's coached tight ends, and so he was an assistant offensive line coach, played offensive line. So some of this could also be for, let's see if because I do think the other guys are more likely as a coordinator. I don't know that you put him as a coordinator, but even though you're interviewing for that, but going from tight ends coach to O-line coach here would be an elevation for him. So that could be part of it too. And he had a reputation for being a good developer of players in Dallas.
Marshawn Lattimore, excuse me. Marcus Lattimore was actually a running back for the Terps many years ago. Was Ray Lewis's half brother, I think it was.
Yeah.
Real quickly on Marshawn Lattimore, this means nothing other than to him personally in his situation, but this was the obvious release, right, for $18 million or whatever in cap savings.
Yes, correct.
Okay. So,
and by the way, he got arrested about a mile from where I grew up.
Okay. Yeah, John is a big, Northeast Ohio guy. All right.
So just like a little trivia. All right.
Yeah. Lastly, back to coordinator talk. So Blau and McDaniel kind of right there on your final two list. What about defensive coordinator?
So they're obviously talking to Patrick Graham. I think he's a real candidate. And then I think you're going to see like what happens with Raheem. Does he get anything? I have a hard time thinking that he'd go from Atlanta to something else right away as a third head coaching job, but he is getting interviews. And then I think Jeff Ulbrich is another one to watch too. He's, coached with Quinn in Atlanta, was a good defensive coordinator with the Jets. One thing I like about him, this is something I hear from a lot of guys. It's not true every time, but if you're for a defensive coordinator, a guy who is a linebackers coach, you're able to pull together coverage and the fronts better than most. Like if you're, sometimes, not every case, but if you're a D-line coach, sometimes how do you understand the coverages behind that? If you're a secondary guy, how do you understand the fronts? And sometimes you do, right? It's not like it's impossible to learn, but not everybody does. But the linebacker, what the thought has always been, like they pull it together from both, and because they've had to experience from.
You're
both.
talking about Ulbrich.
Well, talking about Ulbrich, yeah. So like that would give him an edge, but I do think they're waiting to see what happens with Raheem because obviously he's coached with Dan. Yeah. They both coach with Dan, and Raheem, has been a coordinator. So I think that's a big thing is to have someone in that role who is an experienced play caller.
Raheem, when he started with Quinn in Atlanta, was actually an offensive coach. He was the wide receivers and pass game coordinator before eventually.
He had to do that. He did that to evolve too, and I give him credit.
Yes, he did. Yeah. All right. Thanks. Appreciate it. We'll talk.
As always, Kevin. Thanks.
John Keim, everybody. Tony Skinn, the head coach of George Mason, has right now the best team in the area. They're 15-1. They've got a massive game tomorrow. He'll join us next. George Mason's won 6 in a row. They're 15-1. They're 3-0 in the A10. They sit atop the A10 standings. This is the best start in school history, not only overall record, but also in conference at 3-0. They're 11-0 at home this year, 43-5, by the way, at home under Tony Skinn in Fairfax. And tomorrow they've got a huge conference showdown with VCU, 12 p.m. Eagle Bank Arena in Fairfax. The head coach of George Mason is Tony Skinn. He's with us right now. You know, I'm curious as to whether or not you do what sometimes fans do with their teams, which is if you're not in the top 25, you check to see others receiving votes, which is what I did before you came on to see why George Mason, or if you were getting votes in the AP or the coaches poll, and you haven't yet. Do you look for that? Is it important? And why haven't you gotten those votes at 15-1 yet?
Yeah, you know what? To be honest with you, I don't look. You know, I'm a glass half full type of guy, and you know, as far as I'm concerned, man, you know, all these games matter. The most important thing for us is VCU tomorrow, and you know, we're just going to try to continue to play good basketball, and hopefully it happens. If it happens, that's great for us. If it doesn't, to be 15-1 in January, mid-January, it says a lot, and that's not normal, and that's really just the barometer and the metric that matters most.
Agreed. But on some level, Coach, doesn't it help if you start to get that recognition nationally?
It does. It does. But, you know, as you know, there's just so many levels to, you know, being at the top 25, right? And we've got so many other metrics like KenPom, like the net. I'm constantly watching that. And if you're doing what you need to do and you're, you know, right where you need to be with KenPom and the net, typically that translates into being in the top 25.
KenPom right now, 84, net 77. Just out of curiosity, is VCU quad 1 or is that a quad 2 win if you get it tomorrow?
It's a quad. I believe it's a quad 2. I haven't checked and updated what they're, you know, since their St. Louis loss, but, you know, home loss against one of the better teams in our league, one of the better teams in the country. I don't think it changes where they've been, but it's a quad 2.
All right, tell me about your team this year. There was a big turnover from what you had last year. For those that haven't watched George Mason this year, why are you 15-1?
Man, I think it's the individuals that we have in that locker room. Again, you talk about the phenomenal season that we had last year, and to be able to just lose different guys due to graduation, due to the portal. And then to bring in 11, 12 new guys, you know, you're going to be uncertain about your team like every other coach in America. But I think our staff, we did a phenomenal job in just getting the right kids in our locker room. There's so much to learn. And if you don't have the right individuals that are just coachable, that are committed, it makes it so hard to take the necessary steps to win these games. And these guys have been, I mean, they've been committed from day one. We've battled injury, you know, we battled some adversity. And these guys have just never folded. And so credit to them.
Last year, for those that don't remember, Mason was in the A10 championship game in D.C. against VCU. It was a hell of a final. VCU won it, went on to the NCAA tournament. George Mason went on to the NIT and got a win in the NIT last year. What will... You know, sometimes with the A10, it will come down to the tournament. How do you ensure that it doesn't come down to the tournament between now and the early portion of March when the A10 tournament gets underway in a one and done?
Well, I mean, obviously, you know, to be sitting here 3-0 in conference, it feels good. And, you know, that's kind of the direction we have to continue to take.
Winning the regular season conference.
Yeah, winning the regular season conference, that's not going to be easy. You know, you've got a chance at home to take care of business against a quad 2 team like a VCU. Those games are so important. And again, it's you know, it's the landscape is so much different than what it once was, right? You know, the A10 has been historically a multi-bid league, and you know, you do what you need to do in a non-conference, and you know, you win 12, 13 games in conference play. You get to, you know, your conference tournament, maybe you win 1 or 2 games there. But it's just so much unknown right now with the way this thing goes. And, you know, for me, like I said, to start this thing, I'm a glass half full type of guy. And we just got to be able to take care of business one game at a time and, you know, let the cards fold whenever they do.
I've asked other college basketball coaches this, that especially in this day and age of portal and rosters changing so significantly year to year, when do you have a really good idea of what your team is? I would imagine it takes a lot longer.
I mean, honestly, I'm not going to give you coaches speak. You don't.
You don't ever.
Speak. Yeah, I can only speak for my group. Obviously, when I took the job in year one, we were able to keep one player from the Kim English team. And I thought we did a pretty good job in recruiting the right talent. And I thought we were going to be solid. But there was so much of an unknown between the guys that you didn't know. And obviously, for me, as a first-year head coach, there was just so much uncertainty. Now you fast forward to year two, I felt so much more confident about that team because Jalen Haynes sat out for us in year one, so he was going to be a good player for us. And then you had an all-conference guy in Darius Maddox. You knew exactly who Jared Billups and Woody Newton were. And so that core, I was confident about that core. And that's the reason we were able to schedule and get games, at Marquette, get the Duke game because I knew that team. But in this landscape, when you lose that and you have to revisit and recruit 11, 12 guys, you don't know. You lose 91% of your production. And then your best player on paper, Braden O'Connor, who's your first teamer, he gets hurt in the first half of your first game. You really don't know what to expect. And that's why I continue to give this group, the flowers that they deserve just because they've always stayed together. They can compete at a high level. And, it's been the most coachable group I've had thus far since being at Mason.
When it takes you so long, if ever, to figure it out, how many times do you have to change the way you coach the team stylistically? Like you may have a vision going into the season. We're going to be a team that wants more possessions, and it may evolve into something else. When do you start to figure it out from that standpoint? Or is that also something you don't figure out and you just go game by game?
No, again, I think it's a combination of both. I've said it all season long. Our defensive identity is not going to change. We haven't exactly been exactly who I wanted us to be defensively. I think we're getting better, but we've also been a much, much better offensive team. And so putting a little bit more emphasis on who we are on both sides has been something that I've had to grow into a little bit more because, again, we've been hard-nosed, defensive. You look at all the metrics in the first 2 years, we've been right there. We've been right there as one of the better teams defensively in the country. Not so much this year, but somehow, some way we're 15-1. And so, it's a melting pot of just being able to adjust to your personnel. In this group, like I said, I've said it before, we've got, 8 or 9 starters. And if you look at the way Stas played the other night against Rhode Island, at LaSalle, maybe it's 9 or 10 starters. And so having that balance, being able to go deep down our bench, it's the luxury that a lot of teams don't have this, especially in January when you kind of figured out your rotation. And so these guys have been phenomenal.
We're talking to Tony Skinn, the head coach of George Mason. They're 15-1, best start in school history. Remember, this is a school with a history of actually going to the Final Four, a team in which Tony Skinn played for back in 2006. So, I'm just looking at the KenPom differences between defensive efficiency last year and this year. Last year, you were 31st. This year, you're not. You're at 79th. And what this is what you feel is your identity, as a coach to a certain degree. So can you get it between now and the end of the year to where you want it defensively? And what does that look like, Coach?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's details matter. We say it all the time. And as these guys are learning, these guys all came from different places. So there's so much they had to learn, so much they had to adjust to. The demand is a lot more because, again, certain programs emphasize certain things. And for us, when you watch some of our games, we're one possession away from, taking away a three. We're, one possession away from having, multiple kills, which is 3 kills, 3 stops in a row. All those little things where, we're watching the film, we're seeing it, we're playing really hard, really, for the first 20, 22 seconds, we're doing a hell of a job. And then one thing happens the last 8 seconds of a possession, and it's the difference maker in the game. One possession matters. And again, when we can just tighten that up and take one of those possessions out, there's 6 seconds left on the shot clock and the guy doesn't have his hand up, and you just let a guy tee up a three. At this level, you're going to play against really, really good players that can make that shot. And so we've seen signs of it. We've had doses of it. But again, this is a new group, and we're going to continue to get better. And I think we're right there where we need to be.
You know, I asked somebody you coached for a couple of years ago, Kevin Willard. I asked him a question about teams that have a difficult time scoring, which your team is not having a difficult time scoring this year. But when you have a team like he had a couple of years ago that really struggled to score, and he wants to emphasize defense, isn't it a lot easier or not to get your teams to defend consistently over 40 minutes when you're scoring?
Well, I'll say this, it's hard to be really, really good at both. If you're really, really good at both, you'll be playing in April, right? And so for me, it's always been just being defensive minded enough to just be tough enough to be in games. If you're guarding, at the end of the day, the defense is going to keep you in the game, whether you have an off night or a great night shooting the basketball, right? And so from a defensive standpoint, if you look at all our games since we've been here, we've been right there in all our games. I mean, I'll take it back to even last year when we went to Duke. I believe the halftime score was 25-16. We couldn't score, but Duke couldn't either, obviously. And then Duke just started doing Duke things down the stretch in the second half. But again, for us, we're going to have to live and die by the way we guard. And that's the most important thing for us. And we're going to need it tomorrow night against a VCU team that's got, 5 or 6 guys that can really score the basketball.
So let's talk about the game. What are the keys to beating VCU? VCU, I'm looking at their schedule. As you mentioned, they just lost to a good St. Louis team. The common opponent earlier in the season, you guys lost. Your one loss was to Virginia Tech. They hammered Virginia Tech. What are the keys to winning tomorrow in Fairfax?
Well, we got to, again, it's just one of those games where there's so much history. There's a lot of culture there. I think tomorrow is going to have probably our largest attendance all season long at home. And so, the intensity is going to be there, but our poise is just as important. Even though it is VCU, the game plan and just kind of what we need to do cannot change. Obviously, this is a team that can really, really shoot the three. But again, because they can shoot the three, we can't overextend ourselves and just get them driving in our lanes and touching our paint because they're really, really good at doing both. Like I said earlier, they've got 5 or 6 guys that can put 25 on you. They're very, very good in transition. You take a bad shot, you turn the ball over, they're going to punish you. I think they're one of the better teams in the country, if not top 5 in that category. From a defensive standpoint, they've got a lot of length. They're very, very handsy with the basketball. And so we're going to have to be tough enough to just be able to withstand some of that physicality.
62-22 since taking over at your alma mater. You're the fastest George Mason coach to get to 50 wins. You're 7th nationally currently in the country in career win percentage at 738. Pay attention, people. Tony Skinn is doing a phenomenal job at George Mason, and the Patriots are 15-1. Tomorrow, 12 noon, tickets available. GoMason.com/tickets. Best of luck to you, and I hope we have a chance to talk later on in the season before some of the biggest games in March.
Absolutely. Thank you. Appreciate you having me on.
Tony Skinn, everybody. I'm looking at KenPom. They're 84 in KenPom, but they've got teams in their league like St. Louis and VCU ahead of them. VCU currently 45th in KenPom. In the net rankings, it would be a quad 2 win for Mason, but at this point, they have only one quad 2 win. That A10, like he said, it's different nowadays. You've last year just 2 teams. VCU went, and I think it was Richmond that was the other team because they won the regular season. So you can win the tournament and get the automatic bid, but the only other way to ensure that you've got a pretty good chance is you've got to win the regular season, and you've got to win it with a really impressive overall record, which is what they're building right now. There's a lot of basketball to go, but 3-0 in the league, 15-1 overall. If they can win the league with, say, 2 or 3 league losses and that's it, an at-large bid would definitely be a good bet. All right, Ben Standing will join us next. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com. been a busy week. That's why we've had Ben on so much. But I like having Ben on because I enjoy the conversations with Ben. We talked a lot about the Trae Young deal yesterday. I guess Josh Robbins from The Athletic reported that he doesn't see Trae Young playing much this year, which is what we kind of guessed. And it seems like it would make sense. They cannot in any way put at risk a first-round pick in the upcoming 2026 June draft, right?
No, not at all. I think the part, and as I said, it's the reaction and analysis that has me so perplexed.
Yeah, me too.
Because everybody's like, it doesn't make any sense to think that the Wizards really want Trae Young, that the intention will ultimately be to extend him, while simultaneously saying don't play 30, 40, 50 games after being acquired. Like, that makes no sense unless it's more about, hey, we needed to move on from McCollum and Kispert because we were getting too good, and we'll see where Trae Young's at for next year. Maybe he rehabs his reputation, changes his style, or maybe his $49 million contract is a good trade chip in some way. But I just still can't believe that they would have upended their entire rebuild in the way they were going about it for a guy who very talented, but very not interested in playing defense, too ball dominant. And I just don't see that he's like a winning player ultimately for a really good team.
Now let's talk football so we don't lose the entire audience.
Sure, Young's a big deal.
So, you and I were talking about David Blau yesterday, and we both believe that, if that's the direction, familiarity with Jaden Daniels inside the building, he would be the guy. Mike McDaniel becomes available. And I started to think that, it would have, if they don't ultimately get Mike McDaniel for the organization, it would have been better had Mike McDaniel not been out there and available. Now, if he gets a head coaching job, that's different. But if he ends up as an OC in Baltimore or Detroit or somewhere else, it doesn't matter how they spin Blau, because I think there's a good spin to Blau. We talked about this yesterday, and that is we couldn't let him leave the building. That'll resonate with fans. But beyond that, where do you think we are right now? Give me your odds right now on the next offensive coordinator. Favorite through the next two after the favorite to get the gig.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote about today that I'm not saying that McDaniel and Blau are the, two are similar in any way, except that, like, if Dan Quinn is seeking familiarity, right? One guy he knew for many years with the Falcons as a coaching colleague. And, we talked about how McDaniel's been very open about Dan Quinn helping him with his sobriety. And also, of course, he's been a pretty interesting coordinator / coach. So there's all that. And this would be a shift towards the Shanahan type model, we would presume. On the other hand, with Blau, the lack of experience would be nuts to bring in a guy who was only been a coach for 2 years to suddenly say, hey, you be in charge of the offense, except that, well, one, he's now been around here 2 years, so Dan Quinn does know the guy. And, if they want to keep some sort of consistency for Jaden Daniels, keeping Blau may be the one last way to do it, knowing you already lost Cliff. Tavita Pritchard's gone. Who knows if Mariota, Josh Johnson, Sam Hartman are back. So, this would be a way to do that. So I feel like, it's hard to say that they're the favorites or the front runners because I don't know what's in there. What are their hopes and dreams? But that to me feels pretty logical. Beyond that, similar to what we talked about with the defense, like how much is Dan Quinn going to rely on somebody who's never been a play caller before in what has suddenly become a very big year for his situation? I don't know if I have any names on the offensive side to be like, boy, this guy, it makes too much sense if it's not McDaniel or Blau. But there are obviously a lot of candidates out there.
If Kevin Stefanski didn't get a head coaching job, I don't think that that's going to be off-putting by any stretch. I think people would embrace that. I think they should.
Yeah, I think this is where at some point it gets to the combination of what's the best thing for the team / self-preservation, right? I mean, if Kevin Stefanski on the staff, all anybody is going to talk about for the next year is, hey, if they start off X with this losing record, would Josh Harris make the move and go to Stefanski, right? That's going to be a topic. It doesn't matter. We can sit here and say it wouldn't be, but it absolutely would be. McDaniel might be too, except that like there's a true relationship there. I don't know the relationship between Quinn and Stefanski. So that's the question about if you're bringing in somebody with such a bigger profile, who's especially if they've been a 2-time coach of the year, then that that may not be what Quinn is looking to do. But again, they won't lack for options. There's plenty of guys out there who have been coordinators or up and comers who are interesting. It just what direction do they want to go in, and how much does Quinn's preferences outweigh Jaden Daniels' comfort, knowing they've already now cut his coordinator, the only coordinator he's known, and a lot of these other pieces, like we said, could be missing for next year.
I certainly hope, and I'm not saying that the human element doesn't come into play in my mind when thinking about these things as it just did with you, but I certainly hope that Dan Quinn wouldn't pass on somebody that may be a threat to him if that person is much more qualified to turn this thing back to where it was last year by becoming the offensive coordinator. I kind of sense that Quinn wouldn't fear that. I mean, there are coaches that would strike me as there'd be a level of insecurity with bringing on a former 2-time coach of the year, or even in the case of Mike McDaniel, despite the relationship, a guy who's been a head coach for the last few years. But I'm not struck that way with Quinn. Are you?
I mean, not outwardly, but he's a human being, and this is how human beings operate. Like Nick Saban in college, right, could bring in the hot coach every year to be the offensive coordinator, Lane Kiffin or Steve Sarkisian or whomever, because he's in no threat for anything, right? He could just bring in this person, help rehabilitate them.
I get that, but the question is, do you think that he would operate that way, or do you think he'd be able to overcome any of those insecure thoughts?
Like I said, I think based on what we know of Dan Quinn, I think no, but based on human beings, yes. I don't think this is the one where I'm separating it too much. I mean, unless Dan Quinn and his people are walking blind right now or with blinders on, they have to know he's on the clock now after this bad season, after moving on from Kingsbury. So, sure, if you bring in a Stefanski, that could be a big way to boost this thing around. And he leaves after a year, you move on from there for sure. But at the same time, you start off, who knows what the schedule looks like. They start off the year 1-4. I don't know. I don't know that everybody's safe. So, like I said, no, I agree that Quinn's demeanor, nature does not seem to be that guy, but everybody's human, and I don't discount that in these circumstances.
At Ben Standig on X on Twitter, Substack Ben Standig, Last Man Standing, same name of his podcast. Did you give me your odds, your favorite, your second favorite, and your third favorite, or not?
I didn't. I mean, look, I hear what you're saying about like if McDaniel, it would be better for Washington if McDaniel doesn't become available if he doesn't land here. But, we'll see. I mean, sure, we can look at this and say, boy, if you have the opportunity to coach Jaden Daniels, that's a big deal, right? Well, okay, sure. Detroit is available, and while Jared Goff is in Jaden Daniels, they have way better pieces around the quarterback, not to mention just
Baltimore
as a whole
Baltimore
right now.
too.
Right, Baltimore too. So I can't sit here like if I say that he's the favorite, that sort of infers that doesn't have other options, and depending on how he looks at it, he has better options. Again, he may view it as, hey, Dan Quinn's my guy. Maybe I need to take a step back here, recognize I didn't have all the answers as the head coach. Let me learn from a guy that I trust as a mentor, and see what goes on. That's highly possible. I also don't know. I mean, I'm not positive what his relationship is with Dan Campbell. I know, I could easily see Dan Campbell and Mike McDaniel having one, so I'm not sure. But, yeah, I mean, I think that's the question is what options does he have? And this is, sort of the same thing with Kingsbury and other spots. It's not, we can sit here and anybody can say, oh, he's the favorite for this or the favorite for that. Well, I mean, he'll have options too if he wants them. So I don't know enough about McDaniel to say he'd be a favorite.
Let's rank the three obvious. Let's assume that Mike McDaniel doesn't get a head coaching job, and he might. But the three obvious OC availabilities in terms of attractiveness would be Washington, Baltimore, and Detroit. Rank those three openings. Not for McDaniel, but for anybody.
I mean, I guess depending on your concern with the Lamar of it all, I would say Baltimore 1, Detroit 2, Washington 3. I mean, Washington was easily the worst of those teams. Obviously, they all missed the playoffs, but when you have Lamar, Derrick Henry, Zay Flowers, and some pretty good pieces on the offensive line, I think that you're pretty, you just got to come in there and put on your spin, and you should be good to go. And again, with the Lions, when you have Jahmyr Gibbs, Montgomery, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta, and a pretty viable quarterback in Jared Goff. He's an older guy. He's not the mobile threat that maybe a McDaniel might want, but that's a pretty good way to go. Not to mention you have a head coach who's uber aggressive, so you're not going to be saddled with somebody who's terribly conservative if you're McDaniel. So I think those two are better. I mean, maybe by we get through free agency and such, and maybe Washington adds enough to be like, okay, they got the line, they got Jaden, they got Terry, and now they have this. But that's later. I can't say that today. So I would say Washington is third of those three.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually having a hard time putting them in order. I think that the quarterback here would be the most attractive, personally. Jared Goff's older. Lamar Jackson's been injured. And by the way, it's not just been 1 year. Jaden's been 1 year. I think you certainly, Mike McDaniel's going to know what happened here this year, that the quarterback didn't really play much, nor did their best players a lot. But to your point, there's no Jahmyr Gibbs. There's no, the combination of Jameson Williams and Amon-Ra and Laporta, and playing indoors and probably a better, opportunity to be better on defense. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a tough ranking. I mean, the bottom line is the top OC candidates are probably going to have those top three options, and they're going to have to go through that process. All right. Before I get to defensive coordinator, I had John on last hour, John Keim. Lunda Wells was, interviewed for the OC position. Do you think that is what John suggested it might be? A look into whether or not he could become the offensive line coach more so than OC?
Yeah, I mean, I tweeted that at the time of the news that he was that they tried to seek permission for him last year as the O-line coach, but were denied by Dallas. So that can't be dismissed. And I'd be lying if I said I had a file on Lunda Wells and what kind of a play caller he would be. But Dan Quinn obviously knows, and it would be kind of stunning to think you'd move on from Kingsbury to a guy that, frankly has nobody knows anything about really for that job. The O-line job, well, that may be a different story, and it would also make sense as to why, Dan Quinn, they were willing to move on from Bobby Johnson. Part of that you think is, okay, a new OC probably is going to want their own O-line coach, or it could be that Dan Quinn wants somebody specific for the job, and the guy he worked with in Dallas that they tried to interview last year for that job would obviously make a lot of logical sense, far more than thinking this person is in line for the OC job.
I just saw your tweet. So Washington interviewed I remember Drew Terrell. He was on the staff here, right? Was it with Ron or Gruden? I'm forgetting now. But just tell everybody who they just interviewed as an OC candidate.
Yeah, Drew Terrell, he was with the Rivera staff, I want to say 2020 to 2022. Wide receivers coach. Seemed like, was a young up-and-coming guy, had a good reputation, leaves for Arizona, one of these deals where he's like the receiver coach / passing game coordinator, I believe. Again, you never know where reputations come from, but I just know, I've talked to him over the years when he was here and just seeing him elsewhere. And, seems like a pretty sharp guy. Again, do I think this is somebody for the actual OC job? I mean, that would be seems fairly dubious. I don't know that I don't believe that he and Quinn have worked together before. So now you'd be taking somebody you've never worked with, who's never been an OC, calling plays for that job. I don't know if I buy that, but hey, a lot of these interview situations are about not just today, but tomorrow. Build up a pipeline and see who's out there and get a feel for what's to come. So he seems like a viable coach who's got an interesting story and could be somebody down the line. But again, I'd be stunned if it's for this OC job.
All right. Defensive coordinator. We've talked about it. Patrick Graham interviewed. Raheem's out there. Ulbrich apparently not necessarily out there. They're going to wait to see who they hire as the head coach in Atlanta and then see if that coach wants to keep Jeff Ulbrich. But right now, sort of handicap that race.
Yeah, I mean, I think the easiest way to look at it would be, one of the guys that Quinn knows, Raheem Morris, Ulbrich, or Al Harris would seem to be the logical options. Again, a big year for Dan Quinn if he wants to keep his defense, the scheme, but just says, hey, we need a new voice. Again, I don't see him staying on the call plays. Then one of those three guys I just mentioned would make sense. Ulbrich, Dallas also tried to interview him, but were blocked by Atlanta because, like you said, the Falcons are at least keeping open the possibility that he stays on either as head coach or defensive coordinator. So there's that. But Raheem Morris has had some interviews for head coaching jobs. I don't know if I see him getting a third shot already, but the stranger things have happened. And Al Harris is the defensive backs pass game coordinator with the Bears. They led the league in interceptions this year. Yep. So he was with Quinn in Dallas. So one thing we know about the defense here in 2 years is they have been very poor at getting turnovers. So I don't know if Al Harris has the magic spell for that to happen, but clearly it wasn't happening here. So to me, it would be those three for now. We still don't even know if Jim Schwartz with the Browns is available. Like Ulbrich, they've kind of kept him around before they decide what to do with the head coaching job. Brian Flores is a coaching free agent, but he's in the mix for head coaching jobs, and I don't know if I see him showing up here. That seems like a lot. When you have the defensive coordinator, head coach, or defensive-minded head coach, I don't know about Brian Flores, but that would be sort of the wow hire for sure. And then there's the guys who've never done it before, and again, is Dan Quinn really going to rely on a guy who's never done it before, especially if he doesn't have a prior relationship with for that. So at the moment, I would still look at those guys that he knows from his past, unless we get any indication that he's really open to changing his own scheme, in which case then that's going to open the field a lot more.
Before the season started, he talked a lot about this. I had him on the show, Quinn, and he talked about, the priorities defensively to turn it around, stopping the run and turnover margin, takeaways. And they didn't improve on any of those. The other day he was asked, during that press conference, kind of the big thing from this year defensively, he said, takeaways. Man, they just, they got so used to being, at the top of the heap in Dallas. I mean, they finished first twice, I think 12th of the 3 years he was there, first twice in takeaways, and I think it was 12th on the third year. And last year, I forget where it was last year, it wasn't very good. This year, next to last in the league in takeaways with 10. I mean, he's got to find somebody. Sometimes that's, a little bit of luck and circumstance, but you got to be around the ball to actually recover the ball or intercept the ball. And there were games like the Detroit game where there wasn't anybody around the ball. That makes it difficult to turn the other team over. All right. Give me your Super Bowl pick with the playoffs starting tomorrow.
Oh, wow. Give me a second here. What? Give me your pick, and then I'll give you.
I'm not giving. I'm saving my pick. Max and I are doing that next.
Fancy. All right. Well, give me. Give me the Rams and give me the Broncos. It's hard to trust the Broncos completely, but I'll go Rams Broncos.
Rams Broncos for Ben in the Super Bowl, and who wins it?
If it gets to that point, I'd go with the Rams. I mean, obviously they got a tougher road because they're on the road, but they were the team I think just over the course of the year impressed me the most on both sides. They get Devontae Adams back for the playoffs. We know what McVay can do in these spots. So, yeah, I mean, give me the Rams. It's hard to just to trust Sam Darnold with Seattle, and that's kind of where I'm like, and same thing with the Bears at the 2 seed, and that's where I'm kind of going with the Rams. So Rams over Broncos.
All right. Enjoy it over the weekend. I'll talk to you Monday.
See ya.
Ben Standig, everybody. When we come back, we'll preview the 5 wild card games, and then Max and I will give you our Super Bowl matchup and our Super Bowl winner. That's next. I'll finish up the show with smell test picks. I do want you to know that Window Nation's got a great deal going on right now. Buy 4 windows and get the next 4 windows free. The best part of it is if you choose to finance the purchase, you don't have to pay anything for 2 full years. No money down, no monthly payments, and they're not going to charge you interest for 2 years. If you are tired of your house being uncomfortably cold, we've got some warm days now, but cold weather and maybe even some snow coming in the next week or two, Window Nation will put in new windows that'll make that problem disappear. It's because they're not insulated well. They're older windows. You should replace your windows. Your home will look nicer and you'll have lower heating bills. New windows will pay for themselves and you don't have to pay for them for 2 full years. If you've been thinking about new windows, all I ask is just give Window Nation a chance to come out and give you an estimate. It's free. They'll schedule it for you when it's convenient for you. It'll be an hour or less. You'll actually find out which windows need to be replaced versus those that don't. Window Nation gets it right the first time. 96% of their installs require no follow-up service. They've got over 45,000 5-star reviews, and they were voted number 1 by Forbes magazine in terms of window installation companies around the country. 866-90-NATION, windownation.com.
All right,
All right.
Kev, let's get started. First one of the weekend. Rams heading east to take on the Panthers. LA stumbled a bit down the stretch, but so have Carolina, needing help from the Falcons to get back into the playoffs. Great matchup in the trenches, but LA feels like the more talented team here. It's all going to come down to Stafford's ability to keep the ball clean. 4:30 p.m. kick tomorrow on Fox. Rams minus 10.5. Over under is 46. We got a big number in this one, Kev. Do you think the Panthers can cover it again?
Well, look, they played a month or so ago in Charlotte. Game was, a huge point spread. The Rams were 10.5-point favorites in that game. And then they went and lost the turnover margin 3-0. And with it, lost the game 31-28. I see that as being the only way they lose against Carolina tomorrow, is if they have a horrendous day protecting the football. I think they can run the football. I think it's a big day for Kyron Williams. The Rams are way up there in run block win rate. The Panthers, I think they're good in the trenches, but for some reason they have struggled here recently to stop the run. That's the key. The Rams dominate time of possession. They don't turn it over, and they win. This is, the easiest game to pick a winner theoretically, because it's the biggest point spread. The Rams, by the way, are the biggest road favorite in the history of the NFL playoffs post-merger. No one's ever been a bigger favorite in the NFL playoffs on the road. They're minus 11. There's some 10.5s out there. I like the Rams to win the game. I don't necessarily like it with the point spread one way or the other, because the Panthers have been feisty for sure.
Quite.
And they were even feisty last week, getting their ass kicked for a lot of that game, and they had a chance at the end. That fourth down big throw to Tet McMillan, they ended up scoring to make it 16-14, and they backdoored their way in because Atlanta beat New Orleans. They were, their fate was determined by a game that did not involve them. Rams win this game, and they move on as the 5 seed in the NFC.
All right, next up, we got another rematch, this time Saturday night. Bears-Packers matched up in the playoffs for the first time since, do you know this stat, Kevin?
In the playoffs, it would have been the NFC Championship game.
No,
right?
First time that the Bears and Packers have met in the playoffs since when?
That was 2010. Was it 2010?
The stat I have is the Sunday after Pearl Harbor was the last time that these two teams met.
No, they played in the NFC Championship
but you're
game
right,
at Soldier
they
Field.
did do that. So I think
Aaron
it's
Rodgers
prior to
won that game. That was the
know.
year they won the Super Bowl, right? In Dallas, beating
Yeah.
Pittsburgh?
Yeah, my recall's bad. All right, 2 top-of-the-line head coaches.
Well, your recall went all the way back to the Sunday after Pearl Harbor.
That's true.
That's pretty impressive.
Well,
1941.
I believe things. I believe too many things I see on.
But
online.
they played in the NFC Championship game. That's who they. It was Jake Cutler who was the quarterback for the Bears, and Aaron Rodgers went on the road, won, and then they won the Super Bowl 2 weeks later.
Yeah.
This game, weather's going to be a factor. Have you seen the Chicago situation? It's falling temperatures and big wind, snow showers potentially during the game as well. But wind and dropping temperatures are going to be the issue. Look, experience, I think, matters, although the Bears really, Washington had none last year. They went on the road and won 2 games. I trust the Packers, and I trust Jordan Love more in this spot. I'm picking the Packers to win this game. I think the Packers still have a chance to put something together. They're obviously not the same team defensively without Micah Parsons. Jordan Love's got to play a clean game. If he plays a clean game, I think that they can move the football and score points and possess the football. They shouldn't have lost the Week 16 game. I like the Packers to win this game, but keep an eye on this. Wind, dropping temperatures, snow flurries, snow showers. It could be an issue at Soldier Field. All 6 of all 6 of the games. 6 games this weekend. All 6 are outdoor games. Not one indoor game in the wild card round. And next weekend, potentially all 4 games will be outdoors because Denver and Seattle will be hosting. We haven't seen that in a long time. So I like the Packers.
Yeah, I'm kind of.
You like the Packers?
Yeah, I
you
do.
Picked them,
well,
yeah,
I do like the Packers. You can't get cute out of a coach, like I said about Ben Johnson. Like I think something's gonna happen. I think he's gonna try some stuff that's gonna get him in hot water, much like the Jameson Williams throw in the NFC divisional round game last year against us. But a quick cleanup on that stat, by the way. That was the last time the Bears beat the Packers in the playoffs, was the Sunday after Pearl Harbor. So it's been a long time. So Packers are favored by 1.5. Over-under is 44.5. Wanted to clear that out. 8 p.m. kick on Prime. Next up, Josh Allen and the Bills. They head down south to Duval facing Trevor Lawrence and the Jags. This one's going to come down to James Cook and the Bills' ability to run the football. Jacksonville is number 1 in rush defense in the NFL in terms of yards per game and opponent rush percentage. 1 p.m. kick. Bills favored by 1 point on the road. Over-under is 51.5. What do you got for this one, Kev?
Yeah, this is really, and Ross Tucker on the show yesterday said he thinks the winner of this game wins the AFC Championship and goes to the Super Bowl.
I don't hate it.
And we've already talked about, we ranked our AFC teams. It is wide open in the AFC. So I could certainly see him being right. I think actually out of the matchups, this is really an attractive matchup. I mean, this is a big-time game, a streaking, red-hot Jacksonville team against Josh Allen in the first postseason without Patrick Mahomes there to foil him. But this is not his best team. You know, this is not the best Buffalo team, certainly not on defense. I think this is a game. Look, if Buffalo wins, okay, assuming the Chargers don't beat New England, and I think that's going to be an interesting game Sunday night. If the Bills were to win, they would go to Denver next week. That's a winnable game for Buffalo. I actually think it's in many ways more winnable than going to New England in the second round. Jacksonville would more likely than not go to New England if they win, but Buffalo would be the lowest seeded winning team unless the Chargers win. They would go to the 1 seed. This is going to be a tougher game than maybe next week would be. If they can get by this one, I think they can find themselves in the AFC title game. I think the key to this game by far and away is staying on the field and running the football. I think James Cook goes for $130, $140, and Buffalo wins a lower possession, lower scoring game than most people think it will be. I think most people believe this will be a shootout. You know, it can be very good offense by both teams and not end up being a high-scoring game. When teams don't drop footballs, when they don't punt over and over again, when there aren't big chunk plays and the clock's just rolling on long drives, you lower the possession count, you can get a lower scoring game, even if both offenses are being efficient. I think that's the style of game Buffalo's got to win. They got to keep their defense off the field. Big day for James Cook, and I think Buffalo wins at Jacksonville. But, man, this should be a hell of a game. Really good game for the 1 o'clock game on Sunday wild card weekend. You're talking about arguably the hottest team along with Houston in the NFL, the Jags playing Josh Allen. I think James Cook's the key to this game, though. I like Buffalo.
Yeah, I'm kind of I don't know if I'm going to have a pick in this one. It's just too tight, but I am looking forward to some really good ball. Next up,
you have to have a pick in this game.
You know what? You're right. Fine. Give me Buffalo. No, I'm flipping. I'm sorry. I'm going to flip. Jacksonville. Give me the Jags. They're going to run the ball, and I think Buffalo's rush defense isn't that great either. So,
all right.
Give me Jacksonville. I can't believe I'm riding with the Jags. Growing up, they've been my kind of second team just because they're
really
my grandparents are from down there, so they always root for the
Duval.
Jags. Yeah, Duval. Shout out Liam Cohen. Great start in Jacksonville.
He's done a hell of a job.
He's
a goofball. He's a weirdo. I don't know if he's as weird as Cristobal when he got interviewed last night. God, he's strange. But they're really good. They're really good, and they take the ball away. Buffalo, man. Run the football. Let's see you run the football. Josh Allen being a big part of the run game.
Yeah.
Man, this is the opportunity. What's the narrative about the Bills if they go out in the first round?
Oh, I think I kind of want to say you get rid of McDermott at that point because it depends on how bad the loss is. But
what about Josh Allen?
Man,
does Josh Allen start getting lumped in? Because here's the difference between he and Lamar.
Yeah.
Lamar's never played well in the postseason in their losses. Josh Allen has always been lights out in their losses.
He's always been
Chiefs as an example.
Well, he's always been electric at least. Like he's always had them in it. It's just down the stretch.
Lamar hasn't played necessarily that well in the postseason. Yeah. Josh Allen hasn't played tight Lamar has. But if he doesn't get by the Jags, and they are favored.
Yeah.
I mean, Buffalo against a red-hot Jacksonville team is a short favorite on the road. But if they're out, man, it's going to be a tough sell on McDermott. You're right, for Bills fans.
Buffalo's
All right, let's go to the 4:30 game at the Link.
4:30. Yep. Like you said, Niners heading into the Link, take on the dreaded Eagles. Both teams struggling on opposite sides of the ball. The Niners continue to allow a decent amount of points down the stretch of this season. Meanwhile, the Eagles' offensive issues continue to plague them, finishing bottom half of the league in yards and points per game. But that defense is still pretty damn staunch. 4:30 p.m. kick on Fox. Eagles favored by 5 points. Over under 44.5. What do you got for this one, Kev?
You know, there's been a lot of conversation this week about Vic Fangio because Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay have always said that Vic Fangio is the one dude they just can't consistently figure out. And he was incredibly complimentary this week, talking about Fangio being, he said, quote, he's just always been the best to me schematically. It's got a very sound scheme, doesn't change it much, but it just naturally changes with how he does his coverages, how he does his fronts, the personnel groupings. He's very good at getting a beat on what you're trying to do and making you adjust. I thought it was interesting just how, and Sean McVay's been that way before with Vic Fangio publicly as well. I just wonder how Robert Saleh sort of hears that, he's the best. Well, his guy, Saleh's pretty good as a defensive coordinator. Look, the 49ers, this is where it comes to an end. But I think it's going to be one of those situations where we're going to know early. And to me, it's going to be all about Philly's offense against San Francisco's defense. Because San Francisco is a train wreck right now defensively. They just stink. Not as bad as our team. No one was as bad as our team or Cincinnati or Dallas, but they're really struggling defensively. And, you saw it with Chicago in the shootout 42-38. Seattle only scored 13 points, but that was very misleading. I mean, both backs, ran over San Francisco. They just missed multiple field goals, and they took a big sack in the red zone. And there was just a lot of, the game was never in jeopardy for Seattle, but it should have been 27-3, not 13-3. But to me, Philadelphia's offense is a massive question mark. It just hasn't clicked this year. It's not last year's offense. But if Saquon Barkley is going to get it going, and if they're going to get it going offensively, it's going to be against the 49er defense. And if you see the 49er defense early in the game winning and forcing punts, then you got a dogfight. And then you got to say, even if Philly survives, what are they really? Because this should be the game for the Eagles where they get healthy offensively, where they actually put up 24 plus. On the flip side, you saw what a great defense could do against even San Francisco's red-hot offense last week. It was completely shut down, and I think Philly's defense is in championship form. And I think, they've got a week of rest heading into it. I know some of their starters played against us last week, Jordan Davis, Jomo, et cetera. But Jalen Carter rested, Zach Bond rested, a lot. Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean. To me, though, this is one of those games you're going to know early. If Philly's moving the ball against San Francisco, then they're going to win this game going away. If they don't, then it's going to be a dogfight, and it's going to be a 21-17 type of game. But I'm picking Philadelphia. They're a 5.5-point favorite now. 5-point favorite, somewhere around there. I'm picking Philly to win, but I still question how that works against, say, a Seattle on the road in an NFC title game, or against a Rams coming in next week. You got to score a little bit to win multiple games in the postseason. Who do you like?
It's tough. You know what I do like? I do have a prediction for this game. Eagles fans will be mad no matter win or lose. And if they are happy, it's only because they covered the spread. That I just don't see it being a blowout in terms of in favor of Philly. I think San Francisco is going to be able to at least keep it close. I trust Kyle Shanahan, but like you said, against a Vic Fangio defense, it always gets a little bit dicey. But you know what? Give me the Niners. I'm gonna continue to stand on my hate. And yeah, fade the Eagles.
All right.
All right. Brings us to the Sunday night matchup. Yep. Drake Mays Pats, Justin Herbert's Chargers. A lot of intrigue in this one. Chargers O-line is banged up, but the Patriots don't really have a pass rush. New England feels like a better coach team, but if there's one guy I can't doubt when it matters, it's Jim Harbaugh. 8 p.m. kick, NBC, Pats minus 3.5. Over-under is 46. What do you got for this one, Kev?
I think this is going to be a really good football game.
I do too.
The Patriots are really, really good despite their schedule. I feel like they are, but this is a big test. This is, first of all, an excellent defense, and it's a defense. It's going to come down to the red zone because they play heavy zone. They play heavy too high. So there's going to be a lot of ability to kind of throw underneath and move the chains. But then what happens inside the 20? Are they kicking field goals or are they scoring touchdowns? The thing about New England is they can run the football, in the red zone. They can throw it. They can throw it horizontally. They can throw it down the field. This is a really fascinating matchup. I think the key for the Chargers is you've got to stay ahead of the chains. You cannot, with that offensive line, put Justin Herbert with his fractured, non-throwing hand, in a situation where he's running for his life on 3rd and 10, 3rd and 9. This has to be a 3rd and 3 or less game for the Chargers. And I think it can be with Omarion Hampton, who, after he got hurt against us and missed a big portion of the season, came back, and I think they can run the ball against the Patriots. That's the one thing, maybe they can do in this game. I could see this game going either way. I'm going to pick the Patriots because they're at home. But I like this matchup just from a football fan standpoint because two exceptionally well-coached teams with two excellent quarterbacks. The Patriots' offensive line may end up being their undoing. I'm sorry, the Chargers' offensive line may be their undoing. I'll pick the Patriots, but in a tight game.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on that. I do think that if there is going to be one glaring weakness for the Chargers, it's that banged up offensive line. But and I know that I ranked them 6 in our AFC power rankings and Patriots at number 1, but I really like the Chargers here. I think that defense is probably one of the better ones that Drake May has faced all season. And Jesse Minter, man, I'm not going to doubt him. He's been playing. He's been coaching really well. They've been able to turn the ball over times like whenever they need to. So yeah, I'm gonna ride with the Chargers tonight or tomorrow night or Sunday night.
Sunday night.
You get it.
Yeah, there's a good matchup too, just like Derwin James and Hunter Henry in the red zone, that kind of thing. Because I think I can see both teams getting to the red zone a bunch, and that being the difference right there.
A lot of bend, don't break.
There are some really good football players on both teams, though. Really good players. All right, we'll save our Monday night wild card round weekend pick for Monday. We'll go through the games. But when we come back, I've got a smell test, and we'll give you our Super Bowl predictions with the NFL playoffs kicking off tomorrow. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. 6-1 last week, 117, 65, and 13 on the season. 52 units above 500. That's 64.3% on the year. Let's start with tonight. Tonight, there are two major public plays. The public loves Indiana, laying 3.5, and they love the over 48.5. I'll take Oregon plus the 3.5 and the Oregon-Indiana under 48.5. So two plays on the game tonight. Oregon, the underdog, plus 3.5, and the under 48.5. I did not have a play last night on anything in the game. Let's go to Saturday. Just one play on Saturday, and it's the Saturday night game. It's the Packers laying a point at Soldier Field. There's a big public play on Chicago. There's been sharp money going back and forth here this week, but the Packers laying the point Saturday night is the play. Let's go to Sunday, where right now the play on Sunday. All right, I have to cancel this play now. Sorry. Yeah, it was going to be the Chargers plus the points, but apparently there's a ton of sharp money coming in on New England right now. Okay, so you know what? I'm going to stick with the Chargers plus 3.5.
Woo!
Stick with the Chargers plus 3.5. Let's see if we can get a better number on that game.
Who knows? That hook might save you.
I'm hoping to find something better than 3.5. I don't think I'm going to find it. No, it's 3.5 everywhere.
Yeah.
Chargers plus the 3.5. I'm going to save my Monday night pick, which I'm pretty sure will be the Steelers plus the 3. I'll save that for Monday and give that out on Monday because I just want to see what happens with this number. Hold on for one sec. It's all 3s out there right now.
All 3s.
I'll give it out now. Pittsburgh plus 3. Oregon plus 3.5. Oregon, Indiana under 48.5. The Packers -1. The Chargers plus 3.5. And the Steelers plus 3. So those 5 plays for the weekend. Good luck for entertainment purposes only. I do need to mention that our poll of the day is up. It's driven by Waldorf Honda, and it all starts with a click. WaldorfHonda.com. Our Team 980 poll of the day on the eve of the NFL postseason. Which conference contains the Super Bowl winner? The NFC or the AFC? That's the question. Again, driven by Waldorf Honda. Click on WaldorfHonda.com. All right, let's give out our Super Bowl picks. I'll start. I'll give you my NFC. You give me your NFC, then you start with the AFC, and then I'll give you my AFC. My NFC playoffs go like this. I think the Rams win this weekend, Philly wins, and the Packers win. Next weekend, we get the Rams at Philly, the Packers at Seattle, and that creates a Rams at Seattle NFC championship game, and the Rams get that revenge after that crazy 38-37 Thursday night game right before Christmas. I've got the Rams representing the NFC in the Super Bowl. Let me hear your NFC and then your AFC picks.
Well, so my NFC, I'm going to take the Rams this weekend. I'm going to take the Packers. I think they're going to beat the Bears. Give me the Niners over the Eagles, and then that's my NFC. My AFC is going to be, I'm going to stick with the NFC right now. I'm taking the Rams to make it to the Super Bowl. I placed this wager at the beginning of when we were talking about the Texans that morning. Yeah. So the Texans are going to be my AFC pick at the end of it. I'm going to spoil it all. But Texans-Rams is going to be my Super Bowl matchup. I placed a wager. That's what I'm rooting for. That's where my heart is. So I'm sticking by my pockets.
All right. I'm expecting complete chaos in the AFC playoffs. I'm just going to quickly get to the AFC title game. Buffalo at New England. And I know I just gave out the Chargers plus 3.5 in Foxborough on Sunday night, but maybe they lose by 3. Maybe it's a 24-21 in the snow. Maybe there's some sort of crazy play that creates a rule change. in the snow at Foxborough. But I've got Buffalo and New England in the AFC Championship game, and I'll go with Josh Allen over Drake May. And I've got Buffalo in the Super Bowl against the Rams. Be a hell of a Super Bowl. I've got the Rams, though, winning the Super Bowl over Buffalo. Go ahead. What's your Super Bowl matchup?
Do I want my bet to hit or not? My Super Bowl matchup is Rams Texans.
Yeah,
that's where we're going. And Rams. Rams win the Super Bowl over the Texans.
I'm rooting for the. It's funny because I really want Aaron Rodgers in Pittsburgh. I picked them to be in the AFC Championship game before the season started, but I have a wager on Houston to go to the Super Bowl. I will be hedging against that on Monday night.
Probably,
for sure. All right, that's it for the day. Enjoy the football over the weekend. We'll be back on Monday to recap it all.